dear friends, thinkers, and gamers. Happy hump day. Are you feeling hump day? I'm feeling hump day. It's definitely one of those where it's a little harder to get over the hump here in these neck of the woods. So I hope you're soldiering through your week well. Welcome to Tales of Praxis. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withaterriblefate.com, your online publication home for all literary studies of video games. I was a little late this evening because I was making myself some tea. So it's also, and maybe this is part of why it's such a hump day to work through for me. I was going to say unseasonably cold. I mean, it's February, so it should be cold, but we've been getting such unseasonably warm weather in Colorado that I think my body adjusted and started to believe that it was summertime. And today clouds rolled in and it was bitter cold. And I made the mistake of going on a run and getting one of those chills that you feel inside your body. So he's doing what he can to warm up. If you are just tuning in to Tales of Praxis for the first time, it's a series that I've been running for the better part of a year on With a Terrible Fate, focused just on Bandai Namco's amazing series of JRPGs, the Tales or Tales of games, a series that heavily influenced me as a person and a thinker and a gamer growing up. And so when Bandai Namco announced that they were going to be remastering Tales of Symphonia, the game which in many ways started my lifelong love of gaming and also my interest in thinking about the philosophy of games, I said to myself, now I work in the philosophy of video game narrative. I analyze games and publish on them and try to contribute to the discourse all the time. It's past time that I revisit this series that was so special to me with an analytical eye and try to understand what are the themes that it's wrestling with? What is the language that it is putting together in scaffolding to express those themes to us? And more to the point, to give us tools to work through those concepts and deeply human ideas of what it is to form an identity, form a community, decide the impact that we want to have on the world, and not only in the games, but also in our real lives. So I've been doing that for the better part of a year on With a Terrible Fate in two formats. One being the one which you have found if you are hanging out here, especially if you're on Twitch, and I hope that you are, but if you're watching the VOD on YouTube, that's cool too, to each their own. But we've been diving into what I call these live book clubs, beginning with that Tales of Symphonia remaster that I was telling you about, in hopes that we will eventually be able to work through all of the Tales titles together with a real-life JRPG party of a variety of people who tune in the chat, contribute their views, their own experiences. We have a few hanging out already here. Hey Grail, hey Pottery, great to see you. Some of them are deeply familiar with the Tales franchise, as is the case for Grail and Pottery. Some of them just love video game storytelling and want a different perspective on what it is to rigorously engage with these games and understand what it is that they're trying to tell us. So no matter what your background, you're welcome here. If you love the stories of games the way that other people love novels, films, theater, what have you, you have found your home, and we are so happy to have you here. The other horn of the series is a series of long-form analytical articles, which is more of how I typically publish on With a Terrible Fate, all dedicated just to deep dives into various aspects of these wonderful Tales games. So you can find those on With a Terrible Fate as well. And as recently as, I think it was just last week, already Aaron is losing track, but quite recently, I had the pleasure of publishing a new study focused just on Chester Berklight, one of the original characters from the original Tales game, Tales of Fantasia, and one who is often, I think for pretty important reasons that we don't talk about, disregarded in conversations about the Tales series. So I wanted to try to explore why that was. I ended up finding a new way of reading not only Tales of Fantasia, but also Tales of Symphonia and Dawn of the New World, all of those Azalea games which take place in the same continuity. So I encourage you to check that out. I'll drop a link to that in a second. But the other thing that I wanted to share as we get rolling on this fine Wednesday evening is, as promised last time, although a little late because that's how we roll, we have a new podcast episode out, which my friend and colleague Dan Hughes and I recorded over the weekend. It was a lot of fun because a couple weeks out from our trip together to Japan for Dan's bachelor party, because he's getting married in a couple weeks at this point, we got back together to do a little bit of reminiscing, wistfully wishing that we were still in Japan, but also reflecting, now that we have the benefit of a little hindsight, on which experiences meant the most to us, which were the most fun and rewarding for our friendship, but also the most revealing and engaging for our interest in the study of video games. Because as you know, especially if you're here on Tales of Praxis, so many of the games that we love have deep, deep cultural roots and also actual developmental roots in Japan. And the more time that I especially have been thinking about my trip there, the more I've started thinking about different aspects of the underlying Japanese culture that I want to explore in the way that I'm playing and reading these games. Dan, maybe it wasn't as revelatory for him because he's an East Asian and religious studies scholar, so he's been working in that area for quite a while. But for someone like me who comes at it from more the perspective of Western philosophy, it was really rewarding. And we talk about that a bit in the podcast. We talk about some experiences that I haven't really discussed on the stream yet. And we also talk about our most recent gaming adventures, Dan in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and I in Inscription, like I was talking about on Monday. So take a lesson if you want something on in the background while you're gaming, or just something to tune into for an hour or so. Let me know what you think. Let me know what kind of experiences it calls to your mind in terms of which real world adventures encouraged you to think about your gaming lives a little bit differently. So we have that on the docket. Let me go ahead and share that article also if anyone's hanging out and hasn't seen it yet. This is the link to the article on Chester. Beyond that, folks, as you know, if you've been following, it's a pretty chill and unusual week for Tales of Praxis because we spent, well, I can just look at the playtime. It's in front of me. 110 hours so far working through the elaborate, complex, and I would say incredibly rewarding story of Tales of Grace's F. And now we are on the fun and challenging back end of working through its post-game content, and specifically the EX dungeon, the Zhonecage. So it's going to be a lot of dungeon crawling. We're going into it on the back of doing that on the Monday stream as well. So I don't think there'll be that much to really offer by way of preamble this time around. What else? I feel like I had something else to share as we were getting things kicked off here. Well, for the benefit of those who are tuned into the ongoing trajectory of Tales of Praxis, like I was alluding to on Monday, I've gotten it in my head to revisit Zisteria and Berseria for my next written study, and I've been continuing to tool around with that and started writing out an outline and some thoughts, and it was definitely one of those magic article ideas to start working on, not dissimilar to my article on Dimlos and Denomos, where the more I sat down and put pen to paper and was thinking about this idea that I want to dive into in terms of how the games ground the possibility of ethics, the more I found a lot of the various moments and motifs and symbols that we dwelled on in each of those two games coming into place in a way that might just link up and provide a unified picture that's greater than the sum of its parts, which, you know, especially for me, is one of the challenges with these JRPGs, and I think for everyone, especially with games like Tales of Berseria, where there are just so many characters and such a rich diversity of experiences that we encounter as we work through those 100-hour games, then it can be really hard to step back and ask, okay, that was a bunch of fun stuff that I did, but it all seems so diverse in what it represents and what it's concerned with. I don't know how to square all the pieces in order to have one coherent understanding of what it was that I worked through or what I was trying to say. So I always kind of take it as a challenge myself to try to figure out how to put those pieces together in a way that can help us to understand the message and theme and everything that we were talking about at the outset in terms of the directive of Tales of Praxis, to try to surface that for the Tales series. So I think it's going to be a fun article. I'm hoping it's not going to be as I was going to say long-winded, but let's say epic and undertaking as the Dimlos and De Nomos article, which was quite an odyssey over several months. But I think it'll be fun not only to revisit those two Tales games, which constitute a duology that in many ways has a distinct flavor relative to the rest of the series. So it'll be fun to look back at that, especially as we're looking forward to our next adventure in Tales of Exilia, as well as wrapping up Tales of Graces. But also, like I said, this article, at least as I conceive of it right now, is going to be thinking about, again, the praxis of the series, thinking about what it says about what it takes for us to act in the world in different ways, but specifically in terms of what it is to go from an understanding of ourselves to an understanding of the ethical and how to act ethically in the world around us. So I'm tooling around with ideas that might also be useful ways for me to bring in my own more proper philosophical background, because a lot of the work that I did, especially in undergrad, was around ethics and what's called meta-ethics, which is basically the philosophy of the foundation of ethics. So what is the world like such that ethics are possible, and what is the nature of things like ethical facts if they exist? So if you're familiar with the more familiar term metaphysics, it's basically the same idea, but for ethics. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, and spoiler alert, if you're on here and you've been watching the streams for a while, you are interested in that stuff, whether you realize it or not. It'll be a fun article for you, and hopefully a fun further link in this overall philosophy of action and identity that we're kind of quietly spinning up for the Tales series as we build all of these different component studies, which I aspire to put together into a bigger picture at some point soon. But the joke's on you, because you, Grail, are the most interested of them all. Just wait, you will see. So between the getting back to podcasting, which is great, and working on that next study, and gearing up for Tales of Exilia, stay tuned as we wrap up Tales of Graces for more details on that, and getting ready for the lecture I mentioned that we're really excited to be going to PAX East in March to give on bosses. It's going to be a busy season for With the Terrible Fate, and also for yours truly, because I also get to go to Dan's wedding and write a couple wedding toasts on top of that and everything else. And I'm even half toying with going outside of the Tales oeuvre in the next week, and potentially publishing something different for Valentine's Day. So don't hold me to that, because I might simply run out of time, knowing me and knowing my schedule right now. But I had an article idea that I'd been sitting on for a while that I was really excited to publish on Valentine's Day last year, and I was just too tired after the work on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, so it got away from me a little bit. But I'm at another critical window where it might make sense to publish it, because it's a meditation on, let's say, an unsung and very melancholic romance in another game series, one that we talk about a lot on here. So I'm sure I'll publish it at some point, but Valentine's Day is definitely the most fitting time. So we'll see if I'm able to wedge that in, or if we wait until next year at that point. What Leshy, there you go. You got it in one, Pottery. Exactly. What Leshy taught me about love. Oh, that one would be good either for Valentine's Day or April Fool's Day if I end up needing a little bit more time. I'm still thinking about Inscription, so that'll be topical for a minute here. We talked a little bit about it on Monday too, but definitely I would say Matt and I, because I'm going to be giving the lecture at PAX East with Matt, this lecture on bosses and their sort of dual nature as really compelling characters, but also really complex and challenging pieces of gameplay. Matt is away at a conference right now, and when he gets back, our plan is to get into the lore room and start brainstorming what we want the actual format to look like, and the games that we want to talk about. So especially over the next few streams, think about bosses that are interesting to you, even the ideas behind bosses that are interesting to you, I'll give you an example. So one thing that I'm really interested in, and this will probably find its way into the presentation, is this idea of what does it take to have empathy for a boss as a player, and how can a game help us to get outside our headspace of simply working through the game aspect and trying to win and beat the boss, and instead get inside the boss's psychology and think about what they are such that they're trying to achieve this thing that is incompatible with our goals as a player. So that's one kind of higher level idea to feed your own brainstorming. And if you have any particular brain bugs about bosses, let me know. Don't be shy. It might just find its way into the presentation, which is not going to be streamed by PAX, I don't think, but we're going to record it and publish it on our YouTube channel like we did with PAX West last year. So look forward to that. I think the last thing that I wanted to do, by way of getting us back into Tales of Graces, was, well, two things. So first, it occurred to me with all of the Japan show and tell, this is not something I got in Japan, but back last year when I was first starting to build out my Tales library as kind of a way of paying homage to the series while I was also doing Tales of Praxis, I got, I think, either a European or an Australian release of a collector's version of Tales of Graces F, because they didn't do one for the States, but they did do one, so damned if I wasn't going to have it. And I never opened it. So as we're finally wrapping up on Tales of Graces F, I figured it would be a nice, fun time to do that. I'm not totally sure what the contents are, so I figured it'd be cool to do a little unboxing. And then I had one thought just to revisit. It's not a big thought, but it's actually a thought based on the back of the box, which I was looking at after 110 hours. And we'll dive back in, wrap up some quests, do some EX dungeons. It'll be a chill vibe on a Wednesday. Pottery, I'll also shout you out because I just want you to know, my friend, your comment about the master volume is still high on my to-do list and on my mind. I was hoping to have time for it today, and I just ran out of time, so I hope you will forgive me, but I'll be damned if I don't at least look into it and see if I can figure out how to fix that before the Friday stream. So stay tuned there, and I appreciate you bearing with me. All right, well, I've already done violence to this box because that shrink wrap was not going to unshrink itself enough to be easily opened, but that's okay. All right, what do we have in here? If anything's going to get out of it, there we go. Tales of Graces F, more beautiful cover art for the game we've been working through all this time. Rated in whatever rating system this is, PG for mild violence. Very different than ESRB. And, oh, I think the fun thing about this case, though, yeah, that's right. So it has the game, but it also has a soundtrack, which I'm definitely going to download after all of the discussions we've had over how great the soundtrack is, and that's one that I'll be using all the time as I work on things. And I'll let you know what's on this, I guess, after I watch it, because I had read this was in it, and I'm not really sure what the contents are, but behind the scenes disc. So maybe a window into the making of Graces, which, especially given everything we've been saying about the development cycle of going from Graces to Graces F, I imagine would be even more interesting than it would be for your typical Tales game. And I'm interested in it, period, because, as you know, we don't usually have the benefit of that kind of content behind the creation of a Tales game, or a lot of games, especially those that come out of Japan. So that will be cool. And then, of course, an art book. Quite nice, matte, although floppy. It's not hardcover. Got images of Asbel and Sophie hanging out on the back. Let's see if there are any highlights quick here. Oh, here's a cool one because it pertains to what we're doing right now. A little model of the rarely discussed Phocelos, with then an image there of how it encircles Ephinea. How about that? Oh, and lots of great collations of all the different box art, the many different versions that we've been talking about. And of course, fun things like all of the little skit cut-ins. Fun. Well, I won't dwell too long on that, but you know I'm a sucker for a good art book and a good collector's edition, so wasn't going to pass that opportunity up. And bug me about the behind-the-scenes disc if I don't get back to that, because that will be fun to revisit and talk about with everyone. All right, my dear friends, and then the last thought, as I said, and I'll remind you, because this is something we talked about at the very beginning of our playthrough here, the one sentence of introduction to Tales of Graces F on the back of the box is, the bonds of friendship are eternal. And it's funny because, of course, so much of the game is rooted in friendship. Pun, I guess, partly intended because the tree on Launt Hill and its roots are a symbol of a particular friendship in the game. But with everything else that we'd been compelled to think about, really, especially within Act 4, I feel like we haven't talked about friendship in a minute. So I didn't want to dwell on it too much, but it occurred to me as I was thinking about that, especially in the wake of Act 4, I feel like there's an interesting way in which you could frame up the confrontation with the Fodra Queen as kind of this challenge of how can humanity become friends with a planet? Which sounds kind of trite, but I think especially on the back of all of the thinking that the game has done about the nature of friendship and what it takes to support someone else in a way that empowers you both without disrespecting one or another. It seems like the right kind of fourth act content to me, where there's enough meat on the bone in terms of the concepts at that point that you really can kind of critically interrogate what it means for humanity to harmonize with the rest of the ecosystem in a way that is functionally equivalent and maybe even metaphysically equivalent to friendship, in the way that we also see Asbel, become friends with Lambda or reassert his friendship with Richard, things like that. It made me smile when I had that thought earlier today because I don't know if we've talked about this particular line on the stream before, but one of my favorite lines, which is one of the reasons that I hope they don't ever do a remake of Tales of Phantasia, because I feel like this is an artifact of the way lines were translated and localized at the time. I don't think they would keep it in. But when you encounter Douse at the end of the game and the party is trying to understand why he's been targeting Magi technology, and they think like, were you trying to like protect the planet or something? And he just laughs and says, do I look like a tree hugger to you? Which makes me smile every time, especially for that to come out of the mouth of a villain as complex and challenging as Douse. But not least of which because there's this kind of symbolic friendship tree in Tales of Grace's F. I think there is kind of a fun and interesting and non-trivial sense in which by the end of Act 4, we kind of become tree huggers, coming to understand not just our own place in the world and not just how to forge new communities with those who are close to us, but what it takes to actually become something like a global citizen in terms of understanding the ecosystem and the voice of the planet. Something really interesting to see come to fruition in a game where, like we talked about for a lot of Act 1 through 3, where we are thinking more about those intimate interpersonal relationships, so much of the world and even the political events surrounding countries in the world exists as some pretty faded out background, with the party pretty actively not engaging with those political questions. I'm more concerned with the idea of Richard and Sophie and what they want and how they can help them, things like that. Oh, I'm glad that you listened, Pottery. I hope that you enjoyed it. Yes, well, and thank you for all of our discussions reinforcing the importance of that mantle. I am more than happy to be an advocate for that and to shout you out for being such a vocal proponent of it. Yeah, so hopefully, especially with you knowing your background in Inscription, that gave you a little more context into what I was thinking about the game. If you had any other thoughts on that or anything else in the podcast, definitely let me know. Happy to chat about it. And that, along with the volume issue, is definitely still on my list because I meant it when I said it on Monday. I think that's the best excuse I've heard so far, or best reason rather, to actually make a Discord for With a Terrible Fate that's accessible to the whole community. Because we've had one that we've used kind of off and on amongst the analysts, but we've never kind of figured out the magic formula to make it public. But especially in tandem with all these great discussions we're now having on Twitch and some other corners of the internet, I feel like the time is right and the form fits the function. So stay tuned for that as well. Yep, absolutely. You got to be able to spoily talk. So that's all the motivation I need. That's on my list on high priority with the volume thing. Oh, that's interesting, Grail. So I wonder, do you feel like is there a difference in your mind between anime and games where you would like where with similar games and anime in terms of the things they're talking about or the twists they have, you would say that about the anime but not about the game? What makes the difference for you? Yeah, that's right. Well, I know at this point in Tales of Graces, we're in so deep, it's a bit of a foregone conclusion that we'll be talking about a bunch of the games. But I will just shout out, it's so nice to have the ethos in the chat and the broader community that even as we're this far in and we want to talk about all of the intertextual connections, we're still, I would say, pretty supremely thoughtful about how we talk about the games that we haven't played together, or we at least try to be. So kudos to us for that. And that's the best transition that I can possibly make back into this crazy EX dungeon adventure of the Zhonecage. So let's get back to that. Right after I fix my video capture card again. The funniest thing to me about this, I know I complain about OBS every time this happens, but literally I tested this right before the stream, and yet somehow it still totally forgot it. And now we're back. Alright. Well, it's free and it works so damn well and it's easy enough for Aaron to understand, so I can't be that frustrated with OBS. Thank you, OBS gods. Alright, there we go. Okay, so you don't think there is a difference, although playing a game and watching someone else play it are vastly different experiences. Totally. I completely agree with that. Whereas being spoiled on anime or book is painful. Yeah. I think it can be painful no matter what. I think I've talked about this on the stream before, but one of the lectures that we gave at PAX South in Texas back when that was a thing, it no longer is, was all about the nature of spoilers in games. And I still think the culture is coming around on it a little bit, but I think a lot of people don't recognize how deeply a spoiler can change your most basic experience with a game, because since games are interactive, they depend on your motives and your understanding of the world that drive the reasons according to which you act when you're making the decisions in the game. And so if you know that something pivotal is coming up, or you know that your character isn't actually the person you think he is at the start of the game or something like that, it's going to completely change the psychology of how you engage with your own choices in the game, which is going to make it into a totally different experience and therefore a completely different art object. Not to say that you can't still have fun with it, but it's going to be just drastically different, I would say, from what it was if it hadn't been spoiled for you. So that's always my kind of party line on why I try to avoid spoilers, especially for games. I try to for all media, but I think it's just, it hits different with games. Oh, really, Pottery? Wow, so you must have been super duper hardcore a few years ago, huh? Was there some particular event or cultural trend that led you to soften? Do you have a sense of that? All right, and we will keep chatting, but to keep progressing also, I was going to take a little break from the EX dungeon because, Grail, you were saying at the end of the last stream, we have a couple quests that we can close out here. So I don't know if I have it in me to fight the dragons by the Valkanus yet, but there are a couple others you mentioned, like talking to the Karta man and going to the turtles at HQ. So I'm going to say let's dive into those and make some progress there. And I think most of them are just there and back quests, and then we can get back to the EX dungeon. How about that? I'm also going to refill our Eleth mixer because I didn't realize how low we are. Yeah, that's the reason, Grail, just to get you away from the OST. See, I completely disagree, Grail, because, like, the way I'm coming from it, if this makes sense, and I might not be saying it in the best way, is because the medium is interactive, if you know something about the story that is not revealed to you within the story itself, it's like you're expected to act and you have control over it, but you don't have control over your own control. It's like you lose a certain amount of agency over your own choices because someone has antecedently colored your choices based on what they've decided to tell you about the game going into it. And I feel like that just like the way that almost does violence to your agency in the medium, to me, is so much more offensive and degrading than spoiling something non-interactive. But I can see both sides of it for sure. Okay, so first we were going back to Zafir, right? The cartoon name is Zafir. Right. Stop number 1. Yeah, I think that's fair, Pottery. Although I would say, I mean, I can see both sides of the way that corporations draw party lines on it also, because I think I mentioned this back when Beyond the Dawn was coming out for Tales of Arise. You know, Namco said something to the effect of, oh, please don't stream past this point in the game until we say it's okay to do so, because we want people to be able to experience it fresh and not have it spoiled. And I can see why, you know, companies dictating how they want you to consume or not consume their product could feel kind of gross or unwarranted or like overreaching. But on the other hand, I feel like, especially in this day and age where people spew all kinds of content and discussion of games over the internet, like in the 24 hours after it's released, when very few humans would have the time to actually play through it so far, I think it's nice, at least in cases like that, for companies to actually ask, you know, just try to be mindful, because we put this together, you know, with a particular kind of engagement in mind, and we'd like people to be able to actually have that experience. I think, at least in some cases, there can be a pretty heartwarming level of thoughtfulness behind that. I think I'm trying to remember where they asked you to stop streaming, Pottery, because I think to the best of my recollection, it was around the point where, and now you've put me in this interesting box where I need to talk about what might be a spoiler without actually spoiling it for people in order to be internally consistent. It was around the point when Nazumil's perspective on the world changed pretty drastically. And I think that based on the way in which she was represented in the advertising and also introduced to the party, and the way in which the adventure was predicated upon her, I could see how that would count as something like a spoiler that would change your experience if you knew that's where things were heading from the get-go. Because I think then it's hard to extend the same sort of sentiments that the party extends to her back at the beginning of the game before those sorts of turns happen. We need to go to the other one. I was premature. Oh, here it is. Lost anklet. All right, an anklet lifted from the bottom of the sea. You feel a strange surge when you touch it. By the way, there's something strange about that anklet I just gave you. It may be best to return it to the original owner. Oh, which is Amber, or Kohaku, if we know what we're talking about. Good, so an excuse to go back to her, which I'd already been planning, so that's great.
What are we gonna do with this anklet?
Maybe one of the girls could wear it.
Let me try it on! Pascal, wait! Huh? I can't get it on!
That's what happens when you don't watch what you eat. Have Sharia try it.
Huh? Me? Yeah! I have to try it after he said that. This is so nerve-wracking. What? No way! I'm too big? This can't be.
Then how about Sophie? What?
It won't
Oh, it
fit.
goes back to the Warriors Roost Inn. Okay, thank you, Graham.
I wonder why it won't fit any of us. Oh my gosh, what if it's cursed?
It was probably just custom made. We should try to return it to its rightful owner.
Oh, I don't know, guys. See, we talked last time about how we have maybe more diverse opinions about gaming than you might expect, considering we're all so big on the Tales series, which is, you know, part of why we're doing this whole Tales of Praxis thing and why it's so rewarding. But this might just be a place where the more you're both talking, the more I might just deeply disagree with you, because so Pottery, to your point about if thing is good, it shouldn't matter if you know the beats of the story beforehand, it should still have a strong effect. Like, maybe a strong effect, but is it the effect that the thing was designed to have? And I'll tell you, because I know you know this example. Back when I did that lecture at PAX South, the example that I gave was Spec Ops. Certainly it's still worth playing Spec Ops if you know the twist, but I think that game is so deeply about the twist and what it says about the psychology of the player that it's like it's going to be just a radically different game if you know what's happening going into it. I'm sorry, my apartment complex is garbage. All right, someone at least got the car alarm. Sometimes they don't. It's why it's a hard question, Pottery, and I'm smiling because I absolutely knew you were going to needle me about that. But here's the thing, I don't think it's a matter of what the author intended, because similar to what you were saying about The Last of Us Part 2 a while ago, like, the creators of Spec Ops might, and I know for a fact have, talked about wanting to say or express certain things or make certain points with the game, and I could still kind of care less about that. I think my point, and this actually redirects back to what we were talking about in terms of how the interactivity of the medium changes the nature of spoilers. My point is that if you look at the text itself, the art object that has been created and designed and is then divorced from the intentions of the author, I think, and you know this, I mean, you know how these systems work, like, it's not just constituted by characters and plot beats and setting and gameplay mechanics. It's also constituted by architecture that sculpts the player's engagement in different ways, and the way in which the story builds up particular expectations or subverts expectations, I think, is just as much of the artifact that is the game that has been created and is now inert and not influenced by the author as something like the motivations or expectations of a particular character that's represented in that text. So I can see why you would needle me about that. I don't actually think it goes back to authorial intent. And then Grail, I mean, we might just have had very deeply different experiences with Tales of Symphonia, but like, oh man, I think about my childhood experience with that, and I think my entire history with gaming would probably be different and much more boring and much less passionate if I had known from the get-go who the final boss was going to be. Because talk about twists, like that whole middle section of the journey with Mythos that I talked about in my most recent publication, like I think for that to hit anywhere near as hard, or to hit at all, in the way that is reified within the art object, you have to be kind of unaware of where things are going in that sense. So, but you know, we're all entitled to our own opinions. But it's funny because I didn't think we were going to diverge that much in this case. All right, I wasn't strong enough to survive the rigors of Riot Peak. Still, I'd like to get a souvenir to take home, and we have a quilt on for that. Really? This is the best souvenir they had? Well, I lost my battle, so I guess I can't complain. Thanks anyway. Well, and that's what I'm saying, Grail. Like, your comment about the way in which, like, particular parts of the internet intentionally spoil things, that's what I was pointing to in terms of saying sometimes I think it is maybe a good and a heartwarming thing that companies actually say, please don't do that, and don't talk about certain parts of a game for a certain amount of time to give people the chance to play it. Because I do think, like, some people get almost this sadistic pleasure in, like, revealing those things to people before they've had any semblance of a chance to experience them, those things themselves. And I think that's just really deeply unfair. So counteracting that, in my view, is a pretty important and worthwhile thing. I'm afraid I lost my precious anklet. If you find it, please bring it to the inn's requests area. If you'd like to be thanked in person, I'll be waiting for you with some of my companions? Oh! so if we go back, is more of the gang from Tales of Hearts going to be there? Oh, that was so much more exciting for me than I expected. And you know why it was so much more exciting for me than I expected? Because no one spoiled it for me. I still remember, I mean, this is it's not like my worst experience with this, but it's the most recent one. Back when we were playing Tales of Zestiria, which I had played that before, someone who was not even interested in engaging with the chat just came in and spoiler bombed with like a key death that happens in the game, which I had forgotten about. So that sucked for me, especially in the middle of the act of reworking the game and thinking so carefully about all of the unfolding relationships between the characters. That was when I changed the preloaded message for the chat saying, please be mindful of spoilers, because it boggles my mind that people get any kind of pleasure in that to actually go out of their way to do it, but I guess some people do. Alright, I'll try one of the dragons just to see how it is. Yeah, and on that level, Pottery, it does sound like, as you say, we're kind of saying the same thing. I think we're just placing different emphasis on it, because you're right. I agree with you in principle. It's not as if having aspects of a game spoiled for you preclude the possibility of having any valuable experience with it. I think that's just transparently wrong and an overreach. I do think there's a special priority that should be given to playing the game in the way it was first presented, without background information, if you can, right? And I think we should also be aware there are ways in which we end up getting spoiled for things that are not malicious and are not people spoiler bombing us. Like we talked last time about classics, right? And what's one aspect of many classic works? They've permeated the culture so much that whether you realize it or not, you probably know all the plot beats. But to our point in that last discussion, that's not to say it's not going to be worth your time to actually go back and experience those works yourself, because you're still going to certainly find something meaningful in it and discover things that you didn't expect. So yes, I certainly think, and to your point too, Grail, like, I know I have also been the victim of this because, as I've been saying, I'm so sensitive to spoilers. And if you get oversensitive, it makes it markedly harder to talk about games with people, and even people who are trying to, discuss them with an eye to spoilers, with the best of intentions, can end up kind of frustrating you because they tell you things that you were hoping not to know about the game. Like, I needle Dan about this sometimes because, like, his favorite way to talk about something that I have not played or seen yet is he'll bring it up and he'll start talking about it a little, and then he'll say, like, and this isn't a spoiler, but, and then say something that to me is clearly a spoiler. It's like, why'd you have to go and say that, man? So I get that my position does not make it easier to have the kind of conversations that I think are the most valuable part of engaging with art or engaging with games, which is why I think, as much as anything, it's just a good faith thing, right? Like, being thoughtful and like acknowledging and respecting the value of that first time experience when you're talking with someone about it. Like, even if you don't quite play by their spoiler rules or something like that, right? I think that can go a long way in terms of making those conversations possible in a way that still makes it perfectly plausible that you can go and play the game and enjoy it. Oh yeah, no, for sure, Pottery. I know you're not trying to have undue influence on me. Don't be silly. These conversations where we wrestle with these things are why we do this stuff. Especially on a stream where we don't have a lot of heavy Tales of Grace's F content to go into. I wasn't expecting we would have much to talk about at all, so I should have known better, knowing us. We would just swing to literary theory instead. So much the better. Yeah, you're right, Grail. This exact conversation is great further evidence that we need the Discord, so I will get on that. Yeah, and so I'm just catching up on messages because we're all so talkative, which I love. Yeah, Pottery, I think, and that maybe is the more interesting pragmatic question, not like, are spoilers good or bad, but rather, how do we draw the line in terms of what we're willing to talk about and not, in order to actually have those valuable conversations and not shut down discussion and cross-pollination of the discourse with games, because we certainly don't want to do that. And I'll tell you, like, it's always a multivariable calculus equation in my head when I'm trying to figure out whether it's worth it even to bring another game into a study that I'm working on. Is, let's say, for example, right, if I'm doing a work on, let's say, Tales of Graces or something for Tales of Praxis, right, and I'm working through it, it's very easy, given the conceit of my series, to bring in other Tales games. But if I find myself thinking, oh man, you know, there's this really interesting way in which, like, thinking about this particular moment in Tales of Graces in conversation with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 sheds more light on Tales of Graces, like, maybe I'll really want to talk about that, and maybe there's something interesting there that we don't get from the Tales games, but it immediately introduces this concern of, well, what if people aren't familiar with the Xenoblade game? And it's a JRPG, so maybe people who, you know, like Tales might want to play that eventually, so am I going to have to worry about spoiling it for them? And then if I mention it and give a spoiler warning, are they not going to read any of the study because they want to avoid it? It's hard, and you certainly don't want to, I think, preemptively censor yourself in a way that, you know, makes it impossible to even recommend a game to someone else, let alone discuss it in depth. But it's a tricky and thorny issue. Spoiler warnings on something like a Discord server, at least, are some useful middle ground, because then, you know, you can have the, well, I guess Reddit and stuff does that too, but the sort of redacted text that's easy to see if you want to. That at least gives you some more agency in that text-based format than when you're just talking with someone. Once met someone who didn't even want to know a character's name or see designs. Well, see, that makes me feel better, Grail, because, like, I'm willing to say I'm not that much of an extremist, because, I mean, those are things that are even represented to you on things like, you know, the box, the front cover, right? And so in that sense, I don't even think of those as spoilers. It is interesting, though, and we could, and I'm sure we will, go down a whole rabbit hole, because, like we've talked about before, there's an interesting sense in which the game, like the art object itself, can present you with information that in another context, if someone outside of the game were showing it to you, my intuition at least would be, well, that's a spoiler. But when it's represented within the game, it doesn't feel like a spoiler. And I'm thinking in particular in the Tales games of those opening cinematics that we've talked about before, right? Where you basically, similar to an anime opening, see like the entire story. And of course, you're not going to understand it at the time, and it just gives you a nice sense of the tone, and you let it wash over you, and you sort of get a feeling for where things are going before you can even mentally process it. So there's a special magic to it. But I certainly wouldn't want a lot of what's shown in the Tales of Graces F opening, for instance, to be just told to me by someone before I even started the game. So it's interesting to think about where you draw that line. Oh, and that's so funny, Pottery. I said that obviously before seeing your most recent message, but I guess that's just further evidence that we're same-brained about this, even if we're kind of on different sides of the same brain fence here. Oh yeah, no, I know, Grail, and I do, to be clear, I have faith in my audience, and that's why, like, if you look at my articles, I'm very clear at the front, like, hey, there are spoilers for these things. And what I'm talking about is also a reason why oftentimes I'll even be more specific and say, like, hey, the whole study has spoilers for these games. There are just a couple things for this other game at the very end, so you can read through most of it and then just take the off-ramp there if you don't want to hear about that. So I try to bend over backwards more than probably most people think is necessary or appropriate. But that's what I'm saying, Grail. What I was saying in terms of my concern is like, you know, if you introduce that kind of like comparative study, bringing in another game or another franchise, and then you warn about spoilers because you want to be careful about these things, then it's what we're talking about in terms of risking preemptively shutting off a conversation or a really interesting intertextual exchange, because then maybe someone will get as far as the first paragraph and see, oh, there are going to be spoilers for this other game, and then not even read any of it, right? Which is what makes it challenging. But certainly that's not to denigrate the faith that I have in my audience. If anything, the reason that I've kept going with A Terrible Fate for almost 10 years is because there are so many thoughtful gamers out there that make these conversations and analyses so rewarding to do, which is why everything you're saying about the importance of propagating and empowering these discussions resonates and hits so deeply with me. All right, with that in mind, I think I've caught up with the conversation for the moment, but I'm sure it'll get away from me while I'm suffering in here. Let's see if this is feasible now. It certainly was not before, but that was many, many levels ago.
I'm trembling.
Okay, Gloandrake, weak to assault arts. What's your level? That's what I'm most concerned about. 75. Okay, that seems like in theory it should be manageable.
Why?
He can't one hit us anymore. That seems like a good sign. Yeah, we could do, and maybe this is an article I'll write at some point, a whole interesting extended study just on kind of that philosophy of opening cinematics, because I don't think it's any coincidence that it's come up in our conversations as many times as it has. And I think there are some pretty interesting, like, non-trivial things you can explore about it in terms of like how it might make sense to read them or not. For instance, I could see it, of course, giving kind of a teaser or a prospectus of the game to the player before she sits down and plays it. But I could also imagine, and I don't have a great example of this off the top of my head. Maybe you could say this about Tales of Graces F with respect to Sophie, thinking about the opening cinematic. But I feel like you could also say, at least in some cases, well, maybe it's less to do with spoiling or teasing things for the player, and more with representing the narrative of the game from the perspective of a certain character in it, or maybe the perspective of the party. So it's showing like at least one lens through which they're making sense of events and the themes of those events as they work through the game, which is an interesting question, right? Like, what is the narrative that the party makes of their own journey versus the narrative that we experience as players? Because it's not obvious that those are going to balance out to the same thing at the end of the day. And in that case, I could imagine saying, well, maybe it would be interesting to play the opening cinematic more during the game to keep track of how these characters are making sense of their own story in contrast with how we're feeling about the events as we play through them, right? So again, that's not to say that's the one and final right way to think about those opening cinematics. I think it's certainly not. My point is just they might be fun to analyze in exactly the way that we're talking about, because I think based on how you decide to read them and how you interpret what they're saying and what it is they're trying to express, you might end up with different implications for how you ought to watch them, how many times, when you ought to watch them, things like that. In the same way that, if you remember my Demos and De Nomos study, it was a symbolic interpretation of the two games that also ended up having real consequences for how, according to that interpretation, you ought to play those games and how you ought to engage with the characters in them.
No, that's not what I meant.
Yeah, you're thinking about, I think it was just called Cerberus, which was very anxiety inducing to me because it was Cerberus with only 2 heads as opposed to 3. But yeah, outside of Elysia, when you go back at the end of the game. Man, yeah, I'm still not over the voice of that one. This one also had a human voice. I was talking, so I missed that, but oh, yeah. Nothing creepier to me in these... Well, that's not true, but one of the creepier things in Tales games to me is monsters like this with human voices. It just raises so many questions that I fear the answers to. Oh, well, that explains why I can speak at all. At least I can speak. Yeah, of course, Grail. Here, I bumped it a skosh in the hopes of not overcorrecting and creating the opposite issue. So just let me know if I didn't change it enough, and I can fiddle with it further. I am Glondrake, one of the Chroma Dragons. Oh, don't say Chroma Dragons. I think that alone resets our Vesperia timer. And Guardian of Eleth. Speak. Why did you steal the Wind Eleth? Oh man, this is so interesting. The thief you seek is not among us. It was another human, a man named Richard. It makes no difference. I ask this of all humanity. Valkanus Creus regulate the Eleth born from the world's core. They are essential for all forms of life. Regulate. Are you saying that the Valkanus Creus are consciously preserving the Eleth balance? In the beginning, this world was empty and without form. Oh, are we going to get a whole Mythopoeia? I did not have that on my bingo card for Grace's F, but knowing the Tales games, I probably should have. There was no color in the ground, no scent in the air. It was naught but wastes and dust. The Valkanus created the flow of Eleth and allowed life to flourish. What do you mean? I think he means that Eleth used to remain dormant instead of traveling around the world. Long ago, Windor was but a barren wasteland filled with naught but the howl of an angry wind. The Valkanus brought water, planted seeds, and created a bond between humans and nature. With the glow of the Valkanus Creus now dim, the needle of time is reverting toward that past. This is some of the most eloquent writing in the game also. That's an awesome story and all, but Richard is still the guy you're after. We just gotta get to him and set things right. Right, and we will. And then he and I can experience Windor's overflowing greenery together, just like we did before. Your determination rings true. I shall grant you this. Hurry, humans. The needle of time must be like the great Phocelos, ever turning forward. It's a nice crystallization of what we've been talking about for the last few streams, and I think you mentioned Pottery in terms of the overall structure of the game, just the ceaseless, insistent progression of time, not dissimilar to what I wrote about with respect to Chester. Proof that you defeated Glondrake. It might come in handy somewhere. Ooh, pique my interest, why don't you, game? Yeah, I was thinking about that, Grail. Although, I don't... This is one of those things where it's hard for me to square just because I don't know how my gameplay ability stacks up with that of the average gamer. But I mean, we at least were certainly under-leveled back when we were at this point in the main story going off to face Richard. So I don't think it was possible for us to face these dragons. And so I wonder whether that's more of a general experience or if that's more of just a me thing, because I'll tell you from a just an overall narrative standpoint, it's really interesting to me, and it adds kind of a hard to place flavor to it. This idea that we go through this whole struggle in the fourth act of engaging with the entire planet of Fodra and trying to get the planet to trust humans in a way that the planet is rejecting because of this long history, and then to go and turn and face these dragons in kind of a smaller version of the exact same conflict, where they're not responding to some long and tortured history. They're responding to this specific thing that happened, where Richard showed up and took all of the Eleth from the Valkanus Krias. But by fighting the party and then having that conversation with the party, another instance of what happens with Lambda and Asbel, and then Lambda and Fodra at the end of the fourth act, we're able to convince the dragons to actually trust in humanity and even support us, right? So part of me feels like there would have been a logic to having evidence of that kind of ability to convince those primordial entities to trust in humans before we went on to the fourth act and dealt with Fodra. But then also, just based on the level discrepancy, part of me wonders, well, did they want players to come back to it after the fourth act? Is there maybe something interesting to be said from a thematic perspective, in the idea that it was available back in the third act, but it was kind of, you were still boxed out of it in a certain sense, so you could try, but it was at least seen in a certain light, a kind of impossible battle until you had the experience with the Fodra Queen? Well, but it is all related pottery, and this is what makes it hard to square, right? Because certainly we can sit down and we can work through our experience of the order in which we did it, but then I think, you know, especially for someone like me who has this the structuralist bent of how I think about stories and art and wants to read them, like, I think there are aspects of the game in terms of like the possible experiences that it affects through its structure, where I think that manifold of different experiences the players can have also says something interesting. So that idea of, regardless of when we engaged with the dragons, they were available but over-leveled when we showed up the first time. What might the game be saying about that, right? Which is the kind of question we can ask and maybe answer, even if our experience led us to deal with them at a certain point in the narrative, whereas other players maybe grinded for a while and then confronted them and can tell us certain things about the world and what it wants to say, I think. So we are going to... I don't think it's a town, right? I'm just trying to get to the Valkanus and Strata. No, I think we have to go through the desert, Strata Desert Ruins. But flippant in an illuminating way, as we all always are, right? Because I think, as with Tales of Grace's F, right, the joke masks or points to some deeper truths, right? Because that question of like, how can we talk about the game's objective fact of the matter structure while also doing justice to and being honest with our personal experiences with the game, is one of the hardest interpretive questions to answer, and it's one that I've wrestled with over the years with The Terrible Fate. If you look back on my earlier work, and I think this is a tendency that a lot of people who get into literary interpretation, or especially the interpretation of games as this interactive and deeply personal medium, they'll, like, ironically, it's a deeply personal medium where everyone can have a different experience, but I think because we have this this closeness to our own experiences where they color our entire perspective on the world, we want to be able to take our one experience with the game and say that it is the truth of the game. Like, this is the one interpretation and the only correct way to see this, and if you have a different idea of the game, you don't know what you're talking about, which is deeply untrue, right? Which is why now, if you read my work and you talk with me, and hopefully you feel this being on the stream, I try to present my work much more as, okay, I'm going to try to square the experience that I had with the game and what I went through as a player with the structure of the game and what's accessible to everyone, so that then hopefully if you're someone who's interested in this game, even, and perhaps especially if you have a different experience with it than I do, you can see the way in which I see it and how I engaged with it, and that can give you a way to new game plus the game, right? Go back to it with a different perspective, see it, and see your own original experience with it in a different light by having this new framework, right? It's all additive. That's the magical thing about conversations such as this, right? You know, we leave something like Tales of Graces with a deeper understanding of the objective game that's out there that we've all played, but how is it that we arrive at that perspective on the objective art object? We arrive at it exactly by wrestling with and adjudicating all of our very different experiences with it, and what it is that we each individually think about it, so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So deeply difficult to do, but deeply important to do. Yeah, it's like, it's the act one of art analysis, right, Pottery? And again, I deeply believe it's only exacerbated in interactive media, for all the reasons that I was talking about. But being able to then move on to the act two and figure out how to use your personal experience as one way of telling the story of your playthrough in a way that is accessible to other people, and that points to broadly accessible aspects of the game structure and what is this trying to say. I mean, that's where I think a lot of the magic happens. And I feel like as gaming is continuing to just mature and get older and have a longer history and more gamers are growing up, I feel like I see more of that, and more receptivity to that kind of analysis in the culture, which is really rewarding to see. It's definitely easier for me to have these kinds of conversations and publish in the way that I do now than it was 10 years ago.
Pascal? Where's Pascal?
Good question. I don't see her anywhere. There you are.
Oh, that's right. It's too hot for her to speak.
Hot?
Don't worry. If you get up real close, you can just barely make out what she's saying. Huh? She isn't saying anything. What's wrong, Pascal?
Crap sandwich! I was playing the silent game and totally winning!
Oh, I'm sorry. Who are you playing against?
Me, of course! Challenging yourself is the ultimate way to give yourself a mental workout.
She's right, you know.
Oh, I see. Now you guys decide to play. Well, forget it.
She's so bizarre.
This woman is beyond me.
And yet, I must have her. Yeah, that's interesting, Grail. Well, I'll say, especially based on what the first Chroma Dragon said, I definitely was immediately feeling deep parallels to the Heavenly Step and that kind of cosmology and mythopoeia of the universe that we only get after, 200 hours of Zestiria and Berseria at the very, very end of the game. So this feels similar, and I will say, again, doesn't have to be the end of the conversation, can just be the beginning of it, but given everything that we've said about the way in which Tales of Graces specifically treats lore about the world as broadly secondary to the relationships that exist and evolve within the world, it would not be surprising to me, and it would feel consistent with that theme, for us to only have opportunities to investigate and think about the lore at all in this deep post-game that has already spanned multiple time frames and retraced its steps to get a different understanding of the world and what's happened within it. Yeah, one of the themes that I come back to and dwell on a lot is the idea of world history in the games, because I think it has probably my favorite way of dealing with historical events and how characters engage with them, and what the past means to the present in these worlds. But yeah, the idea of what role do dragons specifically play in these games is an interesting one, and one that would probably be worth exploring, because remember, of course you get stuff in sort of the Arthurian, mythologically inspired, Western stylized worlds like Systeria. But you do also have dragons like Chroma, which then maybe provides a link to the Ephinea, and these dragons who have some connection with the world that we're still learning about, all the way back to the Dark Dragon in Vinheim in Tales of Symphonia, right? So I think it's one of those things where you don't feel like dragons have deep roots in the series until you think about it and look a little bit more closely. And maybe there wouldn't be that much interesting to say about it, but I feel like maybe there's something there. Even some of Daus's minions, they feel at least dragon adjacent to me. Like some of the ones who show up and you fight in the War of Valhalla and such look a little like Ryukushin powered from Yu-Gi-Oh! If that scans, which is a very, I think, like dragon adjacent creature, if I'm remembering correctly. Oh, you're weak to burst arts, that's why nothing is working. Oh, I see, Grail. So you're talking about dragons specifically as entities that explain the history of the world. Yeah, that's true. A lot of what we learn about Duke and Lucifer in the Great War comes from Chroma eventually. Yeah, that's a good point of comparison too, Potter. I feel like in traditional mythology, dragons are represented as these like wise, immortal creatures, and oftentimes like guardians of the world for that reason, right? So I think there is something that to me feels quite consonant with their typical representation, that not only are they keepers of this knowledge, but they pretty consistently test the party in the way that we're being tested now, but also in terms of the test of the conversation with the party, in terms of what are your goals, what are your values, how do you want to treat the world before they're willing to impart their knowledge. So they're biased guardians in that sense, and judges.
Sorry about that.
In a less serious way than I feel about Mythos Grail, I definitely feel like the Dark Dragon is one of those ideas and characters and concepts that I'm always desperately turning over in my head in an effort to understand or get some traction on. Again, not like Mythos in the sense that like I don't imagine, at least, that my understanding of Tales of Symphonia will turn on my head if I come to see the Dark Dragon in a different way. But maybe I'm being presumptuous. You never know, right? That's why it can be fun to turn these rocks over in the first place. But he's definitely an interesting question mark. Absolutely, Padre. Yeah, finding that area with the ancient dragon, whose name I'm forgetting. Is it just ancient dragon? But the one you're talking about, with whom you can join the Covenant of the Dragons, was one of my favorite memories of my first journey through Dark Souls, because it is so hidden away. It feels so magical. It has all of the best hallmarks of the series in terms of discovering something completely off the beaten path that completely changes your understanding of the world and its scope, but in a very understated way. Special kind of magic. That's an interesting idea, Grail. Yeah, especially since we have the idea of these monster minions from Daus, and Daus is following in the lineage of everyone who later lived on Garrus Carlon. Maybe he was someone who helped Mythos bring an end to the Carlon War or something. Yeah. See, there you go. Sometimes all you have to do is bring it up in the Tales of Praxis chat, because that's something that I had never considered before. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think you're right, Pottery. Well, I'm going to have to get on the wiki and look that up, or I'm going to be bothered by that for the rest of the night. Too many dragons in the Dark Souls lore. Can't keep track of all of them. At least Sekiro just has one. That very special one, which will never be forgotten. Yeah, you really did, Asbel. Stone Dragon, thank you. Bless you, Pottery. Doing my job for me. In AI teammates defense, Grail, I also seem to be incapable of doing that job right now. Yeah, this one definitely seems harder than the last one. Loved it. No question. It felt mystical, ethereal. It changed my idea of the scope of the game, especially with what follows in the narrative, from the sublime to the horrific. I really felt like it was such a centerpiece for making sense of what Wolf's journey amounts to at the end of the day. And my favorite ending is certainly the resolve to return the dragon to the west. So that certainly helps with with everything I see in it as well. Well, actually, maybe this is even a good one to talk about in that boss lecture that I was pitching, because I feel like that fight is a great example of a boss fight that succeeds by virtue of having something to say. Because it is interesting, especially in a Miyazaki game. It is not, by a long shot, one of the harder fights. In fact, I would submit it is probably the easiest boss fight in Sekiro, technically speaking. Unless I'm forgetting one. But off the top of my head, I would say it's the easiest. But it has the aesthetic, the plot relevance, the pathos to just make it a markedly memorable experience where I find myself dwelling on it much more than I do on many other of the bosses in Sekiro. And like I said, I make sense of a lot of the rest of my playthrough and the endings, especially on the back of that battle. And also one that benefits from being situated in such a magical realm within the game, in the truest sense of that, and in a sense that deeply resonates with the magic of the dragon. So that idea of being able to make a truly compelling boss in a game that many people would say is all about its difficulty, and make it memorable, maybe even in part because it's not at the end of the day all that hard. I think that's really interesting.
Sorry about that.
I'm glad you put in the legal disclaimer because I was about to come after you, Pottery. I told you my story about the Demon of Hatred. It's a pretty good story. See, the Folding Monkey ones was hard for me just because I had a bear of a time with the specific kind of stealth that they wanted you to do, and I had a hard time finding them. So, like, yeah, in terms of combat, not very hard, but there was more time than I wanted to spend with Aaron just pulling his hair out trying to find and take down all of those damn monkeys. Whereas the Divine Dragon, he's right in front of you, you can't miss him, he's there for the taking. Yeah, element of life and everything, water, that's a good point, Grail. I hadn't considered that. Well, that makes me hopeful that at least we'll end on a slightly easier note. I am concerned that we're out of life bottles, but hopefully we can finish this. We're pretty close.
Sorry about that.
Alright, well that wasn't good.
Face your fate. Infernal torrent.
See, I don't want two different resurrection shortcuts, so it's very like, it's found theming in Tales of Graces. I'm trusting in Sophie to use her resurrection spell when it's necessary.
Nothing
God. This dive move sucks. I think we've got some momentum now. Curse you! I heard it that time. That was a very unnerving voice. Yeah, so Pottery, I might have told this story on stream before, and if so, I apologize, but it's my favorite Miyazaki glitch story, and it didn't even happen to me. So I fought the Demon of Hatred, and it's what you expect from that fight. You know, I wanted to die in real life. I thought I was going to have to give up my mantle as someone who could play video games, the whole 9 yards, and then after all the existential crises, I beat him. All right. Then Dan was going through the fight because he was behind me in his playthrough, so I had finished with the game, and he was streaming his playthrough to me so that I could, you know, watch him and roast him and tell him he was bad and all the things that friends do, right? So he gets to the Demon of Hatred, and he's messing with it in the arena, and somehow, I wish he had recorded this for posterity. I don't think he did. I don't think either of us has a copy now. But he found a way to jump to the top of one of the like ramparts of scaffolding that's on the battlefield, even though you're not supposed to be able to do that. And when he got Wolf up there, the Demon of Hatred, I swear to God, just turned around and walked to the cliff on the side of the arena and walked right off. And that was game, set, match. It's one of those classic Miyazaki glitches because I've had that in probably almost every one of his games at one point or another, but one that I genuinely would not have believed had I not seen it. And I think I'm still not over being mad at Dan for that to this day because, I mean, you know this from playing Miyazaki games. It is the most frustrating feeling in the world to suffer through one of those bosses and then not even to watch one of your friends breeze through it, but to watch one of your friends meme through it. Like, oh, come on. Come on. The most classic Souls trick. My favorite from me, I don't know if this is my favorite, but I think the most recent one was the, oh, I forget the name now, but the giant suit of armor that you fight in Demon Souls. During one of my later runs of Demon Souls, I walked into the arena and it was literally just standing there and refused to engage with me at all, so just whack it till it's dead. But still, that, not as fun a story as the Demon of Hatred. That's, I think, my favorite glitch story. We had a podcast episode, actually, since we're just hanging out and vibing in this EX game. I'll see if I can find it real quick. Because we did a podcast episode on glitches, which is pretty fun, because talk about, you know, thinking about the structure of games and finding particular thematic content in corners that you don't expect. Glitches are great for that. They oftentimes reveal things about a game that you never would have expected otherwise, but I told this story on that podcast to no one's surprise. Where is it? There it is. And Dark Souls 2 is so deeply unfair from the player's perspective that I think, you know, I feel even better about finding ways to game that, because I feel like that's kind of the only way you have to fight back in a fair way some of the time. There's definitely more than one boss that I would say cheesed rather than properly glitched, but you know, that maybe that's a distinction without a difference. It's true, Grail, and you feel that way about seeing your friends do better than you. Think about someone like me, who's not very good at video games. I think a lot about them, but you've seen my my gameplay performance. I live in the shadow of my Goliath friends when it comes to beating bosses. Yes. Truer words, Pottery. Truer words. Who are you? I am Dupelworm, one of the Chroma Dragons and guardian of Eleth. You protect the Valkanus Krias? See, this is something that's interesting to me too. Just the question and perspective around which content is voiced and which is not. Because like for the EX dungeon, with much of its silliness to be fully voiced, and yet now when we're getting this deeper explanation of the world, it's not voiced. Why is that? Is it to be marked as more optional content, less significant, something that is more textual in the way that a history becomes apocryphal, and we need to do more exegesis on it in order to like get an understanding of it that we can work with, because it's more removed from the party? People would talk about this in some circles as a failing of a game when it's not fully voiced and some content is not, but especially in something that is as textured as a Tales game, let alone Tales of Grace's F, where different acts are stitched together, and sometimes you're wandering through the world, sometimes you're doing gameplay and combat, sometimes you're watching skits. I feel like the variance between some things being voiced and some not just makes me more interested to try to parse out, like, is there thematic content to what ends up being voiced and not? The core of this world produces a nearly unlimited supply of Eleth. However, some new evil now threatens this production. This cannot be allowed to continue. We must unite our power and eliminate the threat with all speed. Wait, this threat you speak of is our friend. Unless the end of all life in this world is your goal, let not friendship lure you into complacency. Okay, you know what's interesting too? I'm going to say this now, and we're still working through the Chroma Dragons, but I'm noticing it here, so I imagine it's going to be consistent across them, especially given what we were talking about in terms of the game maybe wanting you to work through these after you've been through the fourth act. In the same way as I was saying, Sophie's final speech could be read as referring to Richard or to Asbel or to Lambda on the tree, right? Or to Sophie herself. I feel like when the party is talking about you're afraid that this force is going to destroy the world, but the force is our friend, and you have to reconsider because we're trying to figure out how to get everyone to live in harmony. I feel like that could be about Richard, but especially at this point in the game, after we've been through Act 4 and befriended Lambda, and Lambda has helped create this bridge to befriend Phodra, and we've seen Sophie absorb, one of the little queens. I feel like the party could be equally speaking in defense of its friend Richard, or its friend Lambda, or its friend Phodra, in fact. None of whom is here, and all of whom you could conceive of as the Chroma Dragon seeing them threatening the world in one way or another. Pharaoh. Dragons with similar philosophies. Unless the end of all life on this world is your goal, let not friendship lure you into complacency. It will take but a few short years for all the Eleth to vanish. We can't let that happen. Without a functioning Valkanus, Strata will wither and die. Strata took me in when my own home rejected me. I will not abandon her to ruin. Hubert, I know how you feel, Asbel, but if it comes to Strata or Richard, my choice is already made. If you swear to do what must be done in my stead, then I beg of you to make haste. Even now, time grows short. We will restore the Valkanus Krias, this I swear. Then this is yours for the taking. I'm excited to see what these artifacts of the dragons we're collecting do. I certainly didn't do this during my first playthrough. Now go, and do not be distracted by humans' petty Eleth squabbles. For if our master, oh no, is forced to awaken, we will have far worse matters to contend with. Guys, I'm starting to think this is a deeper side quest than I was expecting. I thought it was just going to be some nutty EX bosses. I should have known better. It's Tales, right? You discover the deep and super interesting history of the world once all the other important stuff is said and done. Oh, I'm dialed in. Oh man, you one-shot the... I'm going back in the messages. You one-shot the Watchers and the Soul of Cinder. That is nuts, Pottery. I think I told the story when I was wearing his shirt, but my other favorite one is Ludwig in the Old Hunters when I first fought him and he drew his sword to go into phase through and promptly exploded, which I've never seen in another game. That's the fun thing about Miyazaki, and I have to imagine he knows this and leaves some of it in on purpose, because in a not totally dissimilar way to what we've been talking about with Tales of Grace's F, like, those are hard games, they have tons of lore and pathos and tragedy and suffering, but they can also be deeply funny when you least expect it, oftentimes because of glitches. Yeah, Rom, talk about fights that you remember the first time. That was one of those for me too. But he grew to be one of my favorites because of his role in the story and also the fight itself. Like, I don't think any of the... Oh, that's not true, but it stands out to me as one of the more unique and memorable just boss experiences overall in one of those games. I think, I mean, I read the Water Dragon's Chillness Grail as brought on by Hubert so steadfastly resolving to kill Richard. I feel like once he saw Hubert stand up to Asbel, he was like, oh, all right, if he's willing to stand up and draw such a line in the sand with his friends and his brother, like, I can count on him to take care of this crazy who's trying to absorb all the Eleth. Alright, we are going to the Snow Shroud ruins, I think are the right ones. No, those aren't the right ones. We want the Glacier ruins. That's right. Oh, we have to step outside the map before we can warp. Enjoy dinner, Pottery. Pottery, you never tell us what you make or eat for dinner. Share your meals with us, Pottery. You know from the Tales games how important the act of cooking and consumption is. Something else which I'm hoping to go back to when I look at Berseria, by the way. So I gots to know. I gots to know what we're all eating. I can start. After my run, when I was stuffing my face before the stream, I had leftover tortellini with a spicy chicken sausage and mushrooms and artichokes in a tomato cream sauce. It was good. And talk about, like, found thematic connections between gameplay and the actual words that are expressed by characters, Grail. I think when you put Hubert that way, that strikes me as really revealing of him as a character, because I do think he's kind of like, what do we think of when we think of Hubert? He's this little brother who wet his pants, was neglected and shipped off by his family for reasons that he didn't understand, and so was always kind of weak and small, but got a chip on his shoulder trying to figure out how to defend himself. So it's very easy for me to conceive of him as someone whose bark is worse than his bite, where he's always willing to, you know, stand up for himself and take everyone on and defend his homeland and things like that, but he's not actually all that tanky at the end of the day, as we see come out in battle. I love thinking about the synthesis of Tales characters in terms of their role in the story, but then also what their gameplay dynamics tell us about them. I feel like more often than not you can get some good mileage out of that. This dungeon's puzzle. I don't know, is there a puzzle in this dungeon that we have to do? Are you just talking about moving the blocks? That I'm okay with. I'm still like, I'm deeply living in fear of the floor tile puzzle. So I'd say I'm not ready for that yet, Grail, but yes, I'm okay with the glacial ruins at this point. You took the words out of my mouth, Grail, because that was going to be the next thing that I was going to tell you. I did, and it's so funny what, as a fan of the series, you come to look forward to or get excited about recognizing, because my experience last night was, ah yes, a sewer dungeon, my old friend. I know you all too well. So hopefully that should tell you exactly where I am at in the story.
I am not your sister, Asbel.
And I'm very interested because, as you will probably recall, and I'm hoping this is not a spoiler, but I don't know if I know any more one way or another after that extended conversation we had. But I'm very excited about going to the the holy capital of the world, the seat of the church, which it looks to be the case that that's where we're heading next, because on the one hand, of course, it gives me some deep-seated memories of Doth from that other game that we know and love. But then also, like I think I mentioned, this game, more than I at least have been able to recognize in any of the other Tales games, is very self-consciously rooted in Japanese history. A lot of the Japanese history which Dan shared with me when we were in Japan, actually, with the the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate and the unification of Japan and all of the hegemony and authoritarian rule that happened on the back of that. And so I'm really interested to see sort of how they use that as a backbone in the story to address and interrogate distinctly Tales themes. And so this whole conflict that seems to be brewing between the army and kind of the royal power and the church is super interesting to me, especially so shortly after the war that kind of unified the worlds by force and by fiat. So I'm very keyed into the trouble that is brewing in Hearts right now. Vatican City, baby! There you go. It's an easier way to say it. I know, I have so much love for Tales of Symphonia, as you know, but I have to say, after having reviewed more of the Tales games for Tales of Praxis, like Tales of the Abyss, and now Tales of Hearts, I'm kind of underwhelmed with what they did with the Church of Martel, especially in Tetheala in Tales of Symphonia. And I feel like, again, it's not what Dawn of the New World is known for, but you got to give Dawn of the New World credit, because I do think it adds some more complexity in terms of the multi-dimensional tensions between the political scene and the church and people's relationship with the actual goddess versus like the group of really like a party of church representatives, insofar as Colette was the chosen one who saved the world. So I think that makes it more interesting. But man, going to Tetheala and discovering what a flourishing world looks like that has this unified seat of government and a much more organized and coordinated church, and seeing the model of what that kind of conflict can look like in other games, I wish they had dug a little deeper into it. Really what we get instead is that kind of meditation on what a monster the Pope is with what he does to his own daughter, which is, don't get me wrong, like a great and interesting character study, and Tales of Symphonia has so many of those, but not a lot in terms of the kind of like international scale conflicts that happen between, like, you know, Doth and Malkuth and Kimlasco Lanvaldir, or what seems to be ginning up between the church and state in Tales of Hearts.
cold. Isn't there somewhere we can find shelter?
Well, we're surrounded by a sea of ice, so that might be a little difficult.
Oh, damn, it's cold.
There's no need to get so upset.
Whoa! Right there!
What is it?
You three, I need you all to sneeze again at the same time.
What? Why?
Come on, just
It will
do
open the door to the Ginungagap.
this time.
Come on, it clearly means a lot to her. Here it comes.
You did it! In perfect time.
Ein Sof Hour.
See, wasn't it?
Oh, that was cute. You know, Grail, that's a really good point, and maybe that's part of the story in terms of why it's importantly and thematically different from the churches that we get in other games, because seen in that light, it's almost like it's a point of really important irony in the story, right? Where at the same moment that we would be able to finally see the church in all its glory in a flourishing world where it's not just all the way stations that we see in Silverant, we also have become completely disenchanted with it, because we now know that the angel who has been guiding us throughout the story is just this charlatan who's no different than a Desian. And so it totally like lifts the veil from our eyes, and we're able just to see the church as this coordination of egotistical, selfish, prejudiced people, rather than something that's larger than life and serving in pursuit of a goddess. And we've also made pacts with summon spirits at that point, right? So also, ironically, we already have more of a spiritual connection with sort of the essence of the world at that point in the world's history than the church itself does. Yep, very good point. Ironic though, because of course it's that whole thing that again they talk about more in Dawn of the New World, where it's the Church of Martel, and at once it's a sham, but then also the goddess who's able to bless the world tree and give everyone life is kind of a representation of what they were reaching towards all along. So it's almost like in that way kind of a reversal of what we get in a lot of the other games, where the church is worshiping this thing that doesn't exist, but then through the activities of the party, it's brought into being. Whereas, you know, Lorelei predates the Church of Lorelei in Tales of the Abyss, for instance. Yeah, that's really interesting. We should keep thinking about that. That might be a good, different window through which to compare and contrast some of these games. The different, like, relationships between the organizations that try to understand and marshal the power of the cosmic energies of the world, and what we learn about the actual cosmos itself through the actions of the party in the game. All right, let's make it 3 for 3, friendos. We haven't died yet. I'm taking that as a win.
I'm trembling.
What is Thorbra Wyvern? The names on these fellows. The Chromaist of all Chroma Dragons, if I may say so myself. And I may. Boy, the HP pools on these guys. guess they are immortal dragons who understand and participate more in the world than anyone else, so I get it. I'm still gonna complain about it. See, Grail, I'm using Resurrection. I'm playing by the rules. Oh, please don't have a Mystic Art, but also I kind of want you to have a Mystic Art. They never give them to non-humanoid enemies. Relieved but disappointed. Yeah, and I think for all the reasons we're talking about, Grail, it is very important and pointed that the Amarcians are described as just engineers, which is part of what was interesting to me and still has not been resolved yet about Pascal. This idea that she's just descended from engineers, but there's also something about her bloodline that allows her to resonate with and make pacts with the glyphs that serve as summon spirits. So yeah, that's part of what has me interested with whatever we're going to learn from the dragons, because it does seem like a distinctly and unusually religionless world for a Tales game. Tales of Eternia, that's another great case of a religious practice that is deeply and non-linearly bound up with the cosmic nature of the world that we discover and participate in through the game. Hey, TZ, welcome. Pleasure to have you. Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun with the combat and the story and pretty much everything in between. We've been playing for about 110 hours at this point. What we do on this stream is, I call it a live book club, because we're working through all of the content in this and eventually all of the Tales games from the perspective of doing a really close reading of its storytelling and what it is that it's trying to say and have us experience as players. But it's great to be able to experience that through the lens of so much gameplay and over such a long period of time, because this game has really been with us for several months at this point, and has really given us a different lens through which to appreciate what it's trying to say, not just as a work, but as a work that gives us such a long experience, living our lives alongside the lives and character development of the characters in this party. Tied with what, Grail Hearts? That's awesome. Well, we try to make a point of making it no barrier to entry so that even people who haven't played the series can get a lot out of our studies and what we're exploring about them and port those insights to other games, but many of us do have deep familiarity with the Tales series, so you are in good company. You know, I think I've been telling you, Grail, I've been having quite a lot of fun with the combat system of Hearts. That's why it was kind of a no-brainer for me, given what you've said about Hearts in the past. Got me more excited for Exilia too, though. I didn't realize that was so high up in your rankings for quality of gameplay. And one which, as you know, I know truly nothing about yet, so I'm very excited for that. I guess we can lose yet.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you might have to message me about a good way to do that at some point, because like we talked about, all of the strategy is definitely above my pay grade at the moment, but I can see all of the obvious care they put into the design. I feel like this dragon is definitely stronger than the Wind one. The Wind one, in comparison to these other two, in hindsight, seems to have been a total pushover. These guys are just, I don't want to say they're one-shotting us because they're not, but it's pretty close. Hard for the party to stay upright, at least. Put it that way. I am actually interested. Is it the same level, or is there a level scaling too? No, this is 110. That's why. It's much stronger. The Wind Dragon was level 75. That's interesting. So I wonder, this is one of those things where I'd love to go back and check or look online or something. I wonder whether that's part of the natural structure of the journey, where no matter which dragon you take on first, the second two which you face progressively scale in level, or if it's a fixed state where this dragon is just that much more stronger than the other two, that much stronger, excuse me, which then would say something interesting about kind of the relationships of strength between the elements, as we were talking about, and between these different sentient beings that seem to be governing those elements. A mighty dragon that is the incarnation of Fendel's Valkanus Krios. That's a cool description and explanation. Glad we caught that. Nelson TZ. Well, I'll also say, we talked about this at the beginning, but if you love these games and you find yourself wanting to explore their narratives and the way in which we read them and the value in them in more depth, the other half of what we do is long-form analytical articles, which are published on withtheterriblefate.com, the publication which I founded and run. So, for instance, it's still on my clipboard? No, I don't think it is. But this past week, as an example, since you say you played the Symphonia games, I published a new study concerned with a close reading of Chester from Tales of Fantasia, and using him as a way to interpret and understand Symphonia and Dawn of the New World in some pretty interesting and I would say rewarding ways that I had never considered before. Because I'm one of those for whom the Tales series meant a lot as I was growing up. I played a lot of them. I didn't play all of them, but I'm a philosopher of video game narrative now, and so I wanted to go back and revisit them all and try to understand what it is that they're trying to say and what makes them, in my opinion, so deeply special and magical as games. So part of the joy of the series, which I've been doing for really a year at this point, has been getting very different and communal understandings of these games based on the conversations we have on Twitch and on Reddit and other places online, and understanding not just how I see them, but how other people have seen them and the value that they take from them, and trying to get at that age-old question of what the games are really about at the end of the day. Yes, that is true. As Grail says, we've been working through playthroughs, these live book club studies of the various Tales games since last March, starting with the remastered version of Tales of Symphonia, which was what inspired the series that I've been doing, which is called Tales of Praxis. And as soon as we're done with Tales of Grace's F, we are rolling into the Exilia duology. So starting with the first one, and then going right into the sequel. Neither of which I have played in their entirety before, so I am personally very excited about it. They are, I think at this point, basically the only two Western localized Mothership titles that I haven't played, so I'm very excited to give them another chance now that I've been this deep into the analysis of the overall series. Oh, good looking out, Grail. Thank you. I hadn't realized that. I do hate that the party using other mystic arts can interrupt your Excel finality. I work so hard for those, man. I want to be able to pop off. Ugh, gross. Bro. Alright, let's try it again. That was awesome. We stun locked him for his whole Eleth burst. I didn't even know you could do that. He has every sucky fire art because he is the fire element itself, made manifest. I love it. I don't love it. Gross.
Shining blade of triumph.
It's pretty easy to stun when he's not utterly abusing us. No, that's not who I wanted. Sophie. Yeah, they do seem pretty tanky. I mean, we're not at Tales of Arise levels yet, but this was giving me some some feelings of nostalgia for Tales of Arise, put it that way. But at least this guy is a boss as opposed to a regular enemy in the last dungeon. Ooh, maybe worth another shortcut? Didn't know that, obviously. This may sting is a pretty fun flex for Hubert. You can't stun, only I can stun. Big Bad Dragon, we talked about this. Well, they said something foreboding about their master. I don't know whether that would be another dragon or something different, but I have a sneaking suspicion we're gonna find out. Status effects. Why do you work like that? Oh my god. When your HP bar is so fat that it looks like you're about to die and you still have 50 grand left. I'm gonna steal that idea from you, Grail, because we might be late, but I don't think we're too late. Veil of Faith, you were saying, right? Dragons and Fiends, baby! It looks like it doesn't increase the party's damage, but it shields them from dragons, which is just as useful now, if not more so. You know why we're having a hard time. It's because Rise Up isn't playing. We just need Rise Up. Give us that Rise Up energy. Grail, how's my balance, by the way? Did I fix it? Or do I need to mess with it more? I forgot to follow up with you on that. I guess it's better if you could hear me when I made my joke. Excellent. Thanks for calling that out. Oh, man. Yeah, I saw that coming.
Sorry about that.
God, it's like his tail gets longer every time he uses it. Does, that's true, the first strike. Yeah, a lot more supplemental media for most of these games than a lot of people realize. Yes, with a fellow video game analyst of mine, I last month went on a trip to Japan, and one of the things that I was showing the stream the other day was, among other things that I found and brought back, was a very cute version of the first strike, which I'd never seen before, which has an image of Baby Rapide from the film on the cover. And I'm a huge Rapide nerd, huge dog nerd, obsessed with my own dog, so one of the studies, if you look on The Terrible Fate that I published, was in fact on Tales of Vesperia and Tales of Destiny in conversation with one another, and it features an extended character study of my favorite good boy, Rapide. So, Tales of Vesperia is your jam, got you covered. There we
Your
go.
sword skills are amazing.
Thanks. I'll use them to protect us all.
GG! Yes, thank you. Yeah, I do feel like it's all the bullying that you've beaten into me about needing to use resurrection and just do better health management and not rely on life bottles so much. You know what's funny though? Like, again, maybe this is a me thing, but I don't feel like it is. I'm always pretty liberal with the life bottles, and even in endgame and postgame stuff, that never really has me running into that many issues. So that almost makes me wonder, especially with the addition of the fourth act and everything, if the postgame for Tales of Graces is just a little bit further along the challenge curve than some of the other games. But just a feeling. That's the study on Tales of Vesperia and Tales of Destiny that I was chatting about. It is long, but it totally changed my view of the games in the series to work through it, so hopefully it's something that might be interesting to you too. Bahamut's Tear! Alright, how about that for a classic weapon? Reimagined as a dual blade. I am Forbro Wyvern, one of the Chroma Dragons and guardian of Eleth. Upon my creation, I was born of this land to serve as its protector. Did you say creation? Do you also then know how this land was formed? At first, the world was but a single color. Then Forbrenner began to gather fire Eleth. As a result, this land became a place of snow. So the Valkanus Creus is responsible for Fendel's winter weather. So things will get warmer here now that the Valkanus has stopped functioning? Incorrect. What? Only when all three Valkanus functioned did this become a land capable of supporting and sustaining life. Valkanus Creus are essential to this world. They gather Eleth from its core, and so preserve the land. Heat, light, cold, dark. If the Valkanus Creus are lost, then all will fall with them. You know, it's funny, because I was the one who made this point at the start of the stream, but it didn't really sink in until the third of these dragons. I talked about how one of the key themes of this game, as is stated on the back of the box, is friendship, and I talked about our whole encounter with Fodra Queen in Act 4 as a journey to befriend a world and understand what it is for people to harmonize with the world. So, like we were talking about earlier, Grail and Pottery, this idea that while these dragons were always here, we wouldn't be technically or thematically strong enough to confront them until after going through that fourth act. I really feel that in terms of the characters now having the right perspective and state of mind, understanding how to relate to a planet, which is not an obvious idea or mode of engagement to wrap your head around, but they did that with Fodra Queen, right? And so now they can go back to their homeworld in the past and actually understand the essence of it in a way that they can take and use with humankind to harmonize with it and help sustain life on the world in the future, maybe even in perpetuity. So that makes me think more like there is a logic to returning to these fellows at the time that we did. Similar to what I think you were suggesting without spoiling, Grail. Yeah, but see, I'm playing on, I think normal we decided right now, Grail, so I don't have that excuse, but noted. The Ocarina of Time of all time. I'm surprised it took us that long to get back to that long-standing joke, Grail. It had been months. I thought it was gone. It's never gone. What do you mean? Although that's true, yeah. It's fun because I did say, and the origin of that joke was that I guessed the first time I played Graces the 7-year time skip because it felt a little bit like the setup of Ocarina of Time to me, but I had never gotten this far. I didn't do Act 4 in my original playthrough of it. So the idea that it has this kind of cross-temporal insight on its back end too does make it feel even that little bit more Ocarina of Time to me. Never would have guessed that. I know. But here we are. It's funny. I think I mentioned this a while ago when I was thinking about Tales of Phantasia. It's like, you don't think of Tales as a time travel series, but with the way in which some of these characters think about the history of their world, and also with the different, sometimes non-linear lenses we as players get into it, there's a lot of really touching and powerful and informative, I think, time travel adjacent themes that come up, even though it's not sci-fi in the sense of H.G. Wells giving you a time machine and shooting all over the place, like Chrono Trigger or what have you, in most cases. Tales of Phantasia being an obvious exception. What do you mean? Are you following this, Pascal? He's saying that without Eleth, our world will lose its ability to create and sustain life. So Forburner was both hurting and saving Fendel at the same time. If the Valkanus Creus do not function, the land will revert to a single color. My task is to guard the Valkanus, not to protect life. If this land is unwanted, it shall be discarded. I give you the freedom to choose. Do you seek a living world, or do you seek death? This is cool too, because remember the two dragons that we just encountered earlier in the streams, they all have such markedly different personalities, which, given that we know they're the manifestation of the different elements of Eleth, is a great way of showing how the different elements themselves are so diverse and have different ways of seeing the world and bring different things to the world in exactly the kind of way that would show us as players why it's so threatening and concerning that the world could go back to a single color without any of that diversity. There is no choice for us. We will overcome any and all challenges this world holds. Your determination is admirable. Here, take this with you. And notice also, it was Hubert with the closest connection to Strata who was able to speak to and convince the water Chroma Dragon to help them, and so too with Malik here in Fendel, where he has the deepest roots. Was there anyone in Windor? Because Richard would be the obvious case, and for obvious reasons he's not here. I feel like that was mostly just Asbel talking about Richard, which I guess is same but different, but doesn't quite strike the same note to me. Your determination is admirable. Here, take this with you. Do not forget that determination, humans, for determination alone can save you now. Frobro Wyverns Creus. Proof that you defeated him. It might come in handy somewhere. So we've defeated all three of them. Not sure where those come in handy, but I have a feeling we'll find out. And if we don't naturally find out, I'm confident that Grail will tell us. Well, and the next study I'm working on to publish will in fact be, I was saying at the beginning of the stream, on trying to synthesize and make sense of Tales of Zestiria and Berseria as two works in conversation with one another, and thinking about how they build to a possibility of treating the world and each other ethically in a really complex but also emotionally resonant and rewarding way. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited for it, so I hope you are too. Yeah, I think that's what I got too, Grail. And while we're doing cross-game analysis and comparisons, notice that idea of the world of Ephinea teeming with Eleth, but not being conducive to life, and then being cultivated by the Amarcians such that it could sustain life, is functionally equivalent and structurally equivalent to the tending of a garden. Another huge motif throughout this game, everywhere from Sophie's name to Aston, and his whole courtship with Carrie being centered on the tending of flowers. So that idea of turning a world or a place into something that not only supports life, but also is representative of life in specific ways, as we've been talking about with flowers. It makes a lot of sense to me, but at the same time is cool and surprising that the entire history and ontology of the world would reflect that exact same idea that we've been seeing throughout the game in that very different guise. Oh, no. You're not going to talk me back into the Zhonecage yet, my friend, because I took notes on what you said the last time, and we still have the opportunity to go to Toidle's HQ first. I'm not going back to that hell any sooner than I have to. Bye, TZ. Thanks for stopping by. If you love these games and you love thinking deeply about the storytelling of games and what we can take from them into our real lives, you found a place where that is the only order of business. So hope to see you back. Hope you check out those articles. Go to withaterriblefate.com and take a little bit of time to look at what we're about. Maybe you'll even join our real-life JRPG party on our next Tales of Exilia adventure. I heard's the news. You's got the Dark Toidles to turn over a new leaf. We found him in the Zhonecage. He wasn't very nice. Yeah, actually, he was kind of a jerk. The Dark Toidles is my son. The other day, he sent me a letter. Said he was sorry for all the troubles he'd caused. Now, fair's fair, yeah? Here's that Toidle's flute I promised. Thank you. With that flute, you can cause us to come save yous anytimes, anywheres. Oh, that's awesome. I forgot that's what we were working towards. I see why you said best item in the game, Grail. That tracks. If there's anything you needs from us, just say the words. Or, blow the flutes. And it's an ocarina. Oh, is that the third gemstone of conclusive evidence that we've been playing Ocarina of Time this whole time, Grail? Oh, my head is melting. Help me. A handy flute that lets you call it turtles from anywhere, anytime. Now you can duelize whenever. Ah, the dream. No more wasted experience. Go through the menu and to key items and click on it. Awesome. Oof, I am excited. Alright. Okay, I might just go back to Lot real quick. Are we saying Hubert is Link and not Asbel? I was not expecting that. That is kind of nice, and we have to stop talking about this because Aaron is going to start taking it too seriously and do like a full comparative study of Ocarina of Time and Tales of Grace's F. But the idea that on a very similar kind of journey of growth and development through time, the conclusion of Link's struggles with Ganondorf is to seal him away outside of time, whereas Asbel's conclusion of his journey with Lambda is to have a conversation with him and take him into his own being and raise him and help him mature to a point where it's Lambda who saves the world. That's a pretty cool and compelling contrast, I think, and one that only speaks in favor of all of the cool elements of Grace's storytelling that we've been extolling the virtues of for the last 110 hours. Pudding! Hey, where's my stuff? Don't tell me I'm all out. I'm dying here. This is a dessert emergency. I almost said desert emergency. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Thanks. I'm gonna dump this in a tub and swim around in it. Oh, is it me? For real? And rest. That was the last thing I wanted to do. Not a night's rest. We're at home. It's just a nap. All right. I do love that when Asbel and Hubert come back here for the first time, they revisit the portrait, but with all of Grace's other themes of marching through time and constantly building new family while interrogating and reinterpreting the family you've come from, I could see a really interesting remix of this mechanic in Grace's where, like, every time you come here during the equivalent of a different chapter in the game or something, like as long as you had Asbel, or even if you didn't have Asbel, like the characters could gather around the portrait and maybe talk about and think about the history of the Lot family and their own evolving relationships in different ways. It feels like it would be the perfect kind of cornerstone for that sort of commentary on growth. That's not to say I don't like what they did. To the contrary, it's to say I like what they did so much that my mind can't stop imagining ways in which to extend it, because we clearly don't have enough content in this game already. Alright. I wanted to see also, we could do this at the Zhonecage, but I'm trying to stay away from there for as long as possible for Grail's sake, because I know Grail is already sick of that amazing jam, which I am still enjoying as the music score up there. So let's dualize down here. Revenge and Sorcerer. That does Krios attack and defense. Change the chance of CC up. And that's a better revenge. I don't think we've gotten Sorcerer on anything yet. Let's do that. And a souped up revenge gem. Nice. Oh man, yeah, I'm glad we're doing this now. We hadn't in a while, clearly. Your Xenoblade Chronicles 3 fandom is showing, Grail. And mine is showing in the fact that I completely agree with you. Yeah, that would have been really cool. Although, put it this way, right? Be charitable to the game. It does end on the image of the tree with all of their names carved in it. And I think there's a sense in which, as evidence of the journey and the pact that they made, that is kind of a family portrait, so to speak. Especially with Sophie and Asbel and Cherry as descendant playing out in front of it. Like the gang's all there, kind of. So that's more of a portrait than we might have gotten, to say the least. I don't really want Asbel's sword to have Sorcerer on it. That doesn't strike me as useful. Although maybe for some of these spells. Let's do it. It won't be on for long anyways. Not gonna lie, over 100 hours in and I'm still a little skeeved out that one of the qualities you can get for a weapon is oily. Who's gonna pick up an oily weapon, let alone use it in battle? We talked about Sophie's pigtails as an impediment to doing battle. How about the impediment of trying to keep your grip on an oily weapon while you're fighting? To say nothing of how simply gross it is. Better qualities? No, I don't think so. Can't ever get tired of Launt's theme, though. I'll die on that hill. Not on Launt Hill, but on that hill. It's everything you want in a JRPG hometown vibe. Alright, there we go. Oh, I had completely forgotten that. My goodness. It really is just the game that keeps on giving, isn't it? Even amongst the Tales games, which is really saying something. Man, I don't know what I did to my mixer. I think maybe there's a spellbook that accelerates its growth based on doing something in battle, and I think I had neglected to have that in before, but it has grown handsomely over the last few streams in a way that far outstrips its total growth in the rest of the playthrough. So I'm glad I finally got that sorted after so long. Alright, friends. Back to the Zhonecage. We have plenty of other things left to do in the wild, but that was some good progress on the outside for the minute. Alright. Welcome back to the hardcore arcade vibes. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Alright, on to floor 5. But let it be known, we're going back to floor, I want to say 3? Because I definitely want to see if more of Kohaku's friends from Tales of Hearts have joined her. Ashen Ring. Nerdy glasses. I'll offer this chap. Oh god, we're starting at 125? Don't tell me that. I'm afraid we're gonna get wiped right away. With no one and no no tech around to decrease it at all. I'm scared. Yep, that's about what I expected. God. They just one-shot everyone. That really didn't seem like a fair setup to throw us in here with no way of even reducing the difficulty level right off the bat. Oh, but we can now call it turtles whenever we want, so that should make it easier to keep stocked on life bottles between battles. That makes me feel a little safer with at least getting to the boss. Gartastic, Lucarific, Gaiabulous, and Bruisery. I love that. Oh, Tails. You can get as campy as you want. And Pottery might not like it, but I always will. I'll be there for that. The fact that the enemies can be this strong and also teleport with impunity, also not a fan of that. Like all of them, it doesn't matter. The elementals were doing it, the humanoids are doing it. Yeah, it's gross. It's insulting because there's only 2 of them. You should think it's relatively easy to deal with them, but it's harder than the others. Here's the real question, Pottery. Is it talking trash any more than we would when you were active in the chat? I live by the mantra of not saying anything behind someone's back that I wouldn't say to their face. But that just means I'm equally a bully behind your back and to your face. Oh god, you suck! Grail, I just feel like your constant state is trash talk. That or I just bring it out in you. I guess I don't have enough data to tell one way or another. Now it's 4 on 1. Surely we can just bum rush this guy and be done with this. The fact that this is just one random nothing fight on this floor is quite gross. But again, it started at such an unreasonably high difficulty that maybe we won't have to deal with it going forward. Why use regular talk when trash talk is available? It's got an adjective in front of it. It's got to be better than regular talk, right? That's how adjectives work.
Is everyone okay? Thank goodness.
I mean, barely, Sophie. That was a hell of a time. Whoo-hee! At least Asbo clawed a level out of it. That's something. Mamma mia. Save me from this hell. It's true. It could always be worse. Oh, I forgot to do the thing that we really need to do if we're going to survive this. Turtle swoop. Turtles, turtles, turtles. That's awesome. It just immediately pops into a shop. Not gonna lie, I kind of had visions in my head of being able to use it, and then we see a little animation of the turtles running to us, but, you know, this is still so primed that not even mad. I'm elated. Oh, and we can recharge our mixer. Oh, game changer. That makes me feel a lot safer in working through this. Oh, that is very barely better than what we walked into last time.
Like the damned. Instant balls. Yeah, it's over. Rip to pieces. Stampede strike. It's over. This is the end. Here's the skies. Radiant light, strike forward. Divine conquer.
Yeah, it feels like one of those insanely powered endgame things where by the time you get it in the game, either you don't need it because you needed to go through the hardest content in order to get it at all, or there's like one final hardest thing left that requires it. Which is a nice sweet spot in a JRPG key item design. I'm a big fan of those final things. Like in-game arts feel like that sometimes, or like optional summons. Okay, Grail, yeah, we can try that. My typical prep, as I'm sure you've seen on the stream, is that I like to be able to concentrate damage and just rush and try to kill someone before they have the opportunity to make too much trouble, but with the difficulty level and durability of enemies on this floor, that might not be possible. Oh my god, we didn't have time to change anything there, although we can do strategy here, right? Okay, so... other targets, you said Hubert and Sophie, right? Yeah, okay. Hubert or Sophie, alright. Let's do that, then we have our meleeers, our main meleeers on two different adversaries. I do wish Incineration Wave were just a little bit quicker. I really like it for all the reasons you were talking about, Grail, but just a little slow. Especially for small enemies like this. Against the massive hitbox of the Dark Turtles. It's pretty neat. It's a very funny death quote. Maybe this is prejudiced of me, but I feel like it's even funnier because they're humanoids, so like, it's like they've been programmed with a certain conception of life in the first place, and that like rueful regret of dying at the wrong time is part of what's been programmed into them.
Sorry about that.
That's a good point. Yeah, deal with turret range.
Okay, incineration wave. Plasma shock. Be gone.
Good.
Sorry about that.
Feeling right, I call upon thee. Predicting movement.
Roar! Charge! It's over! Rip to pieces! Stampede strike! Not yet! Let's end this! Aqua bullet!
Shut up! Are we gonna do that? I'm gonna kill you even harder.
Death by moonlight!
Oh my god, get our girls up. I need to get them the experience. They clearly need it. Female humanoid got you caught by auto mod for misogyny. Hilarious. Yeah, it does seem like the apex joke of what they were building to the whole time. That would be such a weird way to misogynistically refer to a woman too. You female humanoid.
We are awesome! Stop! You'll step on them!
Oh, that's so funny. Is that the one you've been waiting for hours and hours, Grail? Because we definitely haven't seen that before. Thank goodness. All right. Now we can feel confident in wrapping up the whole playthrough. Because we couldn't end things before we saw Grail's final post-battle scene. Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one. That was great. It's almost like they want you to see the regular We Are Awesome scene 1,000,001 times first, so that you can really get the full gut punch of the humor on that one when it comes up. Because especially this late in the game, like, I know I'm not expecting new post-battle scenes. So it really does sneak up on you. Alright, I think that's good. I keep remembering, not allowed to run from enemies this way. Want to run from enemies, but my life only gets harder when I do. Good. I believe it. Well, especially because they're all so specific to groups of characters in the party, and I mean, we've tried to spread the love, but we certainly haven't been aggressively diversified in our party composition. And like we just saw, even when you mix up the party, it can take so long to see nuance. It really is a game, like we keep talking about, that's built for multiple really long playthroughs to try to get everything. Which probably also says quite a bit about its themes and how it's telling you to work through the events of life non-linearly and also over and over again to really get the inner meaning of them, to use an esoteric term. It is the end. Thank God. Freeze her in place. Do that marsh area, please. I know it doesn't mean anything to us now that we have the turtle's flute, but it is a kindness that they make one of the stealable items from these monstrosities a life bottle. Yeah, your Xenoblade Chronicles is showing again, Grail. I think, at least in the history of the games that I played, they really set a new standard for just ease and visibility of managing aggro, and they made it such a key part of the gameplay system. So it really does make it notably harder to navigate that dimension of other gameplay systems as a result, because you want something with that level of finesse or control. You just don't get it in most cases.
I expect the best from everyone. It's over. This is the end. Here's the skies. Radiant light, strike forward. Divine It's over. Rip to pieces. Stampede strike. It's over. Rip to pieces. Stampede strike.
Don't fall down on the ground. Get up. I gotta hit you again. Oh, it feels good. You deserve an easy win after all this nonsense. It's a lost art, Grail. It's a lost art. Yeah, I'm trying to think through my my Tails Rolodex. Are there good examples of a pretty tanky mage or healer? I mean, there are examples of hybrid characters that are tanky because they're not pure mages or healers, but I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose. Like, the Swordian Masters in Destiny are all spellcasters, but they're also all tanky because they're all not spellcasters. Or similarly, you get magic swordsmen like Kratos and Zelos. But yeah, I feel like the straight spellcasters, whether you're a mage or a healer, are pretty easy to blow down. Maybe Keel is an exception. Keel, I feel like, went the extra mile in a way I wasn't expecting in terms of staying on his feet a lot of the time. Raw material for the ultimate upgrade. Check out the eye in the sphere. Oh man, we're in it now. I'm dialed in. But that the phrasing of that material in terms of the ultimate upgrade made me concerned that we're really going to have to keep our eyes peeled and go through all the paths in this EX dungeon, because now I feel like there are other ultimate materials we're likely to miss. Yeah. I feel like Rita is kind of light enough on her feet that she can get around a lot of attacks. But that's not really armor, that's more just mobility. I feel like Tyr is pretty close. Again, maybe not like a pure healer or spellcaster, but she's got a lot of that in her. Same with Jade. I mean, Jade is certainly the mage of Tales of the Abyss, but because he's also a swordsman and a colonel and everything, he has a decent amount of armor, I feel like. So maybe Abyss is a good example of a model, or at least something that approximates it. I also feel like because they're monsters and you can customize their stats, you can get away with making some pretty beefy, like monster mages in Dawn of the New World. Yeah, not quite the same thing you're thinking of, but that's an adjacent idea. These are disgusting. I almost want to use an all divider. Oh my god! Ultimate weapons, I like the sound of that. I am amazed though, because I kind of assumed the cameo weapons, the ones that are homages to the other games, would be the ultimate weapons based on the way they were placed in the 4th act. But I should have known better. Yeah, but I still have my pride, Grail, my cursed pride. It's still an L. I know what you mean. It is nice that it's not up for to keep the experience and everything. All right, Sharia, there you go. Well, we may only end up getting through one more floor of the Zhonecage on this stream, but I would say our time was well spent elsewhere. We got through the setup, I think, of a very cool further side quest that I didn't even know about. And we had a lot of good conversation about the literary study and mode of discussion of video games, which you know I'm always here for.
Sorry about that.
That's true. Kurt should have cured me of that. But, like the festering rage of Lambda before Asbel finds him, it only grows back and grows stronger over time. God damn you, Asbel! Stay alive!
Sorry about that.
This guy has less than 3,000 HP left. How are you causing me this much trouble? Okay, he killed Asbel with 591 hit points left. And now we have no life bottles. Cool! I had fun. I don't know about you guys, I had a really good time. Alright. We'll try again. Try again. Go one more time. Might push us a little bit over time, but now I got a chip on my shoulder about it. God, those humanoids. They will pay. They'll all pay. I'll kill every last one of them. Except Sophie. And that, no, except Sophie. Well, and the other ones that are left on Fotra. Well, you and I channel our rage in very different ways, I think, my friend. We could try subbing in Malik for Hubert, I guess. I also would have accepted Aaron from Attack on Titan because I finally finished that at Dan's behest. At least you went with Shulk and not Zanza because that felt like a Zanzaism too. Or Malos, or I'm probably being too generous to compare myself to Jin, so I won't. Let's try subbing in Malik, I guess, for Hubert. Maybe that'll help. Or maybe Pascal? But that might be caster heavy. Although, they're all kind of casters. I can't think that way. It's graceless. Which one is better loadouts? Let's try Pascal. We haven't had Pascal in a long time. Malik we had more recently. I've been missing you, Pascal. Please be competent. The future doesn't belong to you! It's the best shulk you're gonna get out of me, I apologize. Okay, give me, like, someone in a timely manner, please. It's just awful that it starts you this high. Just awful. Well, I'll say this, and then speaking of spoilers, I won't go into it because I really do feel like, insofar as you believe any spoilers are things you shouldn't talk about, AOT is that kind of show now that I've finished it. What I will say about my feeling for the ending so far, Grail, is it made me feel like I'm almost, that I'm only halfway through watching the show, because I immediately started rewatching it and it's a show that feels completely different the second time in a similar way to Nier, right? Borrowing from the gaming world. To the point that I really feel like, especially with a lot of the explanations that we get in the ending, rest of the story and a lot of key scenes and moments and things that you took for granted. So I think certainly it's possible to be uncharitable and say, you know, that means that the ending is going to be confusing or leave you out to sea or not be satisfying, but to me that feels just like a call to watch the show again to get a sense of what it is that's trying to say and what it actually means by it. So that's my I guess my side story project right now, besides Tales, is when I sit down to eat breakfast and dinner, I'll be getting an episode of AOT and gradually working through it again. I know they don't spawn in that first area, but doesn't that suck though? It's like the enemies are already this hard. You don't need to pump up the difficulty more before you encounter them for the first time. Oh my god! I don't think Pascal is helping. I'm gonna switch back to Uber. If I get a chance after this, which I may not. This is awful. I might just... If they kill us, I might just call it for the night because it's that time and Aaron's getting cheesed. Good. Stun yourself during Excel mode. That's good. Yeah, I was thinking about what you call that lesser known strategy, Grail. I had a half inkling in my head that might help get me out of this jam, so I might, if we survive this, I might try to just go and look for that too. Oh, my friend. Like, your brother will always be better than you at fighting games. You will always be better than me at Tales combat, so take solace in that. You! My nemesis. Shut up. Girl, I don't even know what I'm gonna do next. How are you gonna predict
Why the pigtails, Sophie? Pigtails?
Okay, when Pascal enters Excel mode, anyone inside one of her Krios glyphs is able to guard against all attacks, and their own attacks become unguardable. This effect works on all allies within a glyph, so use it in the right place to save your party's bacon. It seems a little baroque, Pascal. Oh. Don't let me forget to actually use our saving grace, because otherwise we will die in a hurry. Alright, got that. Got those. Don't think anything's ready to dualize yet. No, alright. I know, even taking 3 hits, like, I would be able to make do with that. It would still suck, but it would at least be manageable. Good. Oh, okay, but it's just... No, it's 2 enemies. So it's just another enemy. My next move is going to be fighting an enemy, so it doesn't make that much of a difference to my plans. It's true. But as we talked about, these are awful for their own reasons, so it doesn't make me feel that much better. Predict that movement, why don't you? Get wrecked.
Is everyone okay? How bad are your wounds?
I'm just like the tiredest I've been in my entire life, Sharia. Okay. Did we not use any life bottles during that? Oh, God bless. Sometimes things work out. Yeah, they seem to really punish you for casting anything. Alright. No caster this time. Yeah, those spells that the guys shoot really are of damage. I almost feel like just having two of the same type, whether it's the guy or the girl, just makes for more predictable movesets overall. Whereas when you have one of each, it's really just it becomes exponentially more difficult to keep track of the fight. Especially with that. It's not Meteor Storm that spell he has. What is it? Something that's similarly garbage. I was thinking about putting some revive food in it, yeah, because I had a mixer loadout for grinding those rock monsters at the core dojo. Obviously, this is a very different situation. So I'll probably take a second to reset that before the Friday stream.
Somehow.
Okay, alright. Not impossible when we keep the difficulty down. Just impossible to keep the difficulty down. Dinosaur. This isn't a dead end, is it? It kind of looks like a dead end. Oh, that makes sense though, because we saw the wolf in the other pathway. We just got killed before we could go through it. Yes, we probably have to go back in the other direction. Thinking of going back to that guidebook. Oh, that's cool. So maybe that would be a good book to have in the next one. Wish they explained that a little more clearly.
Sorry about that. Be gone! Plasma shot! Infernal torrent! Incineration wave! It's over! Shining blade of triumph!
Couldn't have said it better myself. Alright, I guess our girl is kind of pulling her weight. Just took her a minute to get going. Can't begrudge her that. Oh, I think we can go out this way. This actually looks to be a different way. Maybe it converges in the same place where that warp pad was. Anything? Oh, please, give it to me. Give it to me. Yes. Stop that. Stop being difficult.
Everyone stay on your game.
I really liked that. It's good.
Sorry about that. Max,
Yeah, or just a lot of gaming in general, right? I feel like half the battle is get into a rhythm.
sorry about that.
Puzzle is always what does it take to get into a rhythm in the first place, and then how do you stay in it?
Infernal torrent. Plasma shock. Max output. Plasma shock. I failed everyone. Sorry about that. Okay, death by moonlight. Death by moonlight. Infernal torrent. You ready? Max output.
Okay, hop along. Let's go.
Awesome! Oh, we hadn't seen that one yet. Alright, I'm glad we swapped her back in. That was hilarious. Worth the trip.
Incineration wave. Let destruction reign.
Release. It ends now. Watch me run.
A lot of great, very funny mystic arts in this one. I feel like that's a bit of a lost art. Puts me in mind of Dex and his incredibly memorable mystic art from Dawn of the New World. Weeping over the picture of Alice. Oh man, that's a really cool staff that Pascal has too. I just noticed that. I think that's the Radiant Mythology weapon. Very cool. Okay, this I think is where the portal is. Take me, please. Please. Yeah, I put it on at a time when I liked to sometimes just roll directly into Inferno Torrent, but yeah, I take the point that it's not the most efficient way of mapping it. I don't know what I want to replace it with though. Oh, well, I haven't used Diabolic Rage at all. Nor Shatter Steel Storm. We have some new arts. Fun. Penetrative waves of spiritual energy that seek out Asbel's foes. Sign me up. Just call me Luke von Fabre. I'm all about shooting beams of spiritual energy. Except maybe Malik Beam. But for the Excel finalities, I'm inclined to agree so far. I love the theming of Asbel's, but yeah, it's hard to beat that. Shut up, enemies. Back to 100 for you. I understand why they can't go below 100, but a big part of me really wishes we could weaken them past the point of 100%. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to try it out. Okay, now we should probably find an enemy to fight. I'm getting scared. Okay, boss. Emerald! She heard us talking about her last time. Well, now I'm good and scared. Let's get the difficulty down. Since now that we're on a higher floor and having this much trouble with the enemies, I definitely want to take the difficulty creep seriously for the bosses. Feel my spirit-piercing fangs. That's very cool.
I can still move.
Incineration wave!
Target acquired.
Vanish! Swarm! Plasma shock! Plasma shock!
Right, everyone? Target acquired.
Oh, I gotta remember to use the turtle suit too. I forgot to restock.
Predicting movement.
Infernal torrent! Swarm! Let destruction reign!
Well, I'm glad you made me look at arts, Grail, because I didn't realize we had picked up arts that as well I never used. And surprise, surprise, the new ones are very strong and quite satisfying.
No mercy.
Already got some helping with this story, but
Is everyone okay? Thank goodness.
yeah, those projectile attacks are always a bit of a mixed bag and a bet, aren't they? I'll keep it in mind. Thank goodness we have a boss to test it out on. Okay, so first, let's heal everyone. And now, Toidle Shop. And then I think one more enemy, and then we'll be able to take on Emerald at 100%. Which is where I feel safe. Not safe, but safer.
Everyone stay on your game.
It's over! Rip to pieces! Stampede strike! Roar!
That's cool. And I do love that, totally consonant with everything we were saying during the F-arc about Excelma, the idea that the further growth in characters in terms of everything that they're learning and what they're developing and they're working with each other, and then with Vanda and the F-arc is further reinforced by the acquisition of new arts that are only possible in the F-arc to acquire the stuff that's necessary to acquire them when you come to Ephinea.
Okay! Let the destruction reign!
Cool, keep that in mind, Crow.
Sorry about that. Okay, let destruction reign! Let destruction reign! Death by moonlight! Burn! Max output! Be gone! Let destruction reign! Death by moonlight! Destruction reign!
None shall
Be gone!
Let's go.
Okay, let destruction reign! Feel my spirit by moonlight! We are!
Awesome! Unbeatable! Amazing!
And unable to coordinate.
Not quite as good as the one with Hubert and his classes, but I'm a fan of that too. Alright, 100%. Not going to get any easier than this, literally. I think we maybe used life bottles. Maybe? Yeah, one. Huh. One can make all the difference, as we know. And I think... yeah, okay. Well, a bit of a chore to duelize at the end of a stream, but you know, I'm gonna do it anyway. We'll be quick about it. Great. No, I'm liking it so far. I mean, it seems to be doing wonders for me in the first few battles I'm trying it out. So I'm excited to try out that other new one we got too. I don't remember its name, but never hurts to check your art list. One of the many lessons to absorb through Tales of Graces. Especially when there are so damn many arts to keep track of, huh? Oh, I mixed up the art names in my head. Well, then that's easy. You're wrong. And Shattersteel Swarm is the MVP. Diabolic Rage is the laser, right? That one's good too. It's hard for me to manage it with the charge time, like I was saying earlier. That's why I haven't been gearing up for it. But as you said, maybe better for the boss, or just for enemies that don't teleport. That's the one you were talking about, right? No, that's Incineration Wave. Which one is Diabolic Rage? Have we used that? No, we haven't used it. Okay. So you're talking about something I haven't even used. Well, let's try it out. On a boss, because why not? There we go. Rapid Slash that generates a massive wave of null energy. Can be chained into sheathed attacks. Alright, friendos. Let's see what our old friend and then nemesis has to say. God damn it. I already got the difficulty down to 100. I have no use for you. Oh, I guess I can use it to try out that new art. Oh yeah, I have a vague memory of that one. I guess from my first playthrough, which is weird because I didn't play the F arc, but I definitely have some memory of that in my head. One.
Shining blade of triumph.
Maybe I'm just conflating arts in my head then. Or maybe does he use that same callout for a different art, Death to the Damned? Because I feel like that as much as the art is what I'm remembering.
Is everyone okay? How bad are your wounds?
Okay, now it's Emerald time. Weird. Then I have no idea what I'm remembering it from. Maybe from a past life, another Aaron save file, in the spirit of Tales of Graces. I reloaded Aaron at an earlier state after concluding Aaron's F arc. God damn it, come on. Okay, yeah, we have everything. Great. Let's roll. Oh, interesting. Oh, the curtsy.
It can't be.
So, now that we have the chance to talk with you about it, you were totally a robot the whole time, right? Almost definitely.
You're Emerald?
I am Emerald, and I am not Emerald.
2.0.
What does that mean?
In the body of the humanoid Emerald once used, a soul was born. Emerald had a certain desire, and fulfilling that strong desire has become this soul's calling. I will not let you interfere.
Oh, that's interesting. So is the thesis that Emerald was somehow able to upload her soul into a humanoid, and so it actually was her, just in a different body? So I don't, to the best of my recollection, I don't remember that being explained when we were going through the main game. So that's interesting. That adds a whole other layer to
She
it.
looks serious.
And another point of continuity with something like Lambda as a separate spirit inhabiting Asbel and living alongside him, with this plurality of souls and souls being developed.
But you were on Fodra. How did you get here?
I snuck on board your shuttle when you left Fodra for Ephinea.
Yeah, that tracks.
No one noticed me. Neither you nor Emerald.
Here she comes.
I am very smart and sneaky. Oh, I'm instantly remembering this fight and I'm not liking it.
It's over. This is the end. Here's the skies. Radiant light, strike forth. Divine Incineration wave! Incineration wave! Incineration wave!
Good, good. Oh, that is good. No early Mystic for you. Rare Sherry a W. It only took 115 hours. Boy, am I glad we got her at 100%. I could see this going wrong 8 ways to Sunday if it was 135. Sure, you know. You were being so good. Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, Grail, but actually, especially with these long-range attacks of Asbel's, this does seem more manageable than I remember. Maybe it was mostly just the hell of Lambda's cocoon that made it a tough pill to swallow at the time.
lightning. Bow to my will.
Oh, cool, Grail. Keeping an eye for it.
I can't.
Great. Love it when a boss does that.
Sorry about that. Kneel before me. Killing field.
Forgot about that. Forgot about that. I totally did jinx myself. Oh my god, yeah, because Sherry is petrified, so we can't even do anything until she gets over that. That's great.
Forgive me.
Alright. Well, that was the most demoralizing end to a stream that I have had in a while. Oh, and we didn't even get the joy of Emerald 2.0 sneering at us or saying something cunning or derisive, which I was hoping that she would, to at least lessen the blow a little bit. Alright, friendos, well, we had a hard time with the thing that we set out to do in the first place, working through the Zhonecage, but it's an EX dungeon for a reason. Rest in graces, that's right. We'll remember it. Yeah, the knowledge of how much it sucked. I'm really going to value that going forward in my life. But, you know, the knowledge of even the idea that a new soul could manifest in a body and latch onto the desire of the person that was there in the first place. Again, something that's definitely in the ether, especially in a post-Act 4 context of, say, you know, Sophie deciding to take up Asbel's dream, and so people harmonizing for the better, or now we see for the worse, according to specific desires or goals or dreams. But cool to see that manifest in a more metaphysically imaginative way with the robot that is Emerald gaining her own sentience. And ironic, right? Interested to see if we ever do beat her, if this comes up in the further conversation with her, because remember, it was Emerald who beat back into Sophie her original purpose as Protos Haste of killing Lambda. And so for Emerald herself to give birth to this new entity with its own directive derived from Emerald, kind of ironic that she would split in that way when she was trying to reinforce Sophie according to how she was engineered and intended in the first place. Yeah, we'll see if Aaron has the will to grind or not, but it could go either way. Yeah, think about your Exilia challenge, Grail. It's definitely coming up, so I'll be excited to hear from you on that front. And, lest we forget, it was definitely a rewarding stream, not just for the suffering through the EX dungeon, but got a lot of cool nuggets to chew on in terms of the mythical origin story of the world and the cosmos, with those Chroma Dragons, the world emerging from void and non-being, as is oftentimes the case with mythopoeias or mystical explanations of the cosmos. But then also that idea, which seems to point more directly to what Tales of Graces is about, that it also emerged to be multicolored from a single color, and so the risk, as much as going back to nothing, is more to do with going back to one color. And don't forget that cool idea that we can keep pulling on as we learn more about the world. Hopefully, that Grail mentioned that the world, even once it existed and had the capacity for life, was not fit for life until it was tended to and sculpted as such by people, by the Marcians. So the idea of the kind of stewardship that is required for that, and perhaps the duty it puts upon those who tended and cultivated life in the first place, a really interesting mirror and cosmological extension of what we've been seeing in the tending of flowers throughout the game. So, keep eyes on that. I will take a breath, and hopefully on Friday, not hopefully, I'm sure on Friday we'll be able to burst through a lot of the remaining post-game content. Maybe it'll bleed over to next week, maybe not, we'll see. We're on no timeline either way. But we'll be able to see through this journey of Asbel and his friends and think once again, not just after Act 4, but after the post-game, of what it was trying to say at the end of the day and how we feel about this particular journey of ours, which we've been on, to go back to that idea of personal experience with which we kicked off the stream, and then we'll be looking to and planning our epic adventure through the Tales of Exilia duology after that. So very excited to see where that takes us. Both the Emeralds are just clones of the OG one to begin with. Well, see, and we can talk about this since we'll be fighting our way back to Emerald anyway on Friday, Grail. But yeah, that's part of what I was trying to glom onto, because my understanding had been, I thought that the Emerald we encountered and fought in the main game was a humanoid replica and approximation of Emerald, based on what that Emerald clone we just fought said, and she might be an unreliable narrator, but set that to the side for the moment. It sounded like she was saying the soul of the actual original Emerald was in the humanoid that we encountered in the main game, which, like I said, I don't remember that coming up ever before, because I think we would have clocked it and talked about it. So I'm not sure whether that was just the other Emerald's explanation of it, but yeah, it sounds like maybe Emerald made more than one body for herself, and one of them generated the soul in the way that she was talking about. Maybe other humanoids on the planet trying to seek some kind of leadership put together another Emerald body and it gained some kind of sentience. There's definitely something suspicious going on, but with the different measures that the remaining people on Fodra have taken to try to figure out how to survive there on their basically dead world, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to put together more than one instance of their former leaders just to try to get some leadership. Remember how kind of, in hindsight, hauntingly maternal Emerald was to a lot of those humanoids, directing them and guiding them when we first encountered her on Fodra, for instance. Alright, friendos. Well, that's the other fun thing that's still awaiting us in this EX dungeon, I think, is that as nonsensical with a capital N as this combat is, it really is cool to get these different windows into characters from across the game. And like we talked about a little bit last time, perfect time at the end of our journey through time and space and the growth of these characters to revisit people who represented such distinct kinds of conflict for particular characters in the party or the party as a whole at different stages in their growth, and confront them at the terminus of all of that personal development the characters have been through. So I'm sure this discussion of Emerald is just the tip of the iceberg. We have, look at this, 5 more floors to go, including 4 with bosses other than Emerald, so plenty of good discussion to pull from the well yet in this story that keeps on giving. Yeah, I can be an apologist for a lot in a game, but this combat, I don't know. I'm sure I'll find a way into it, because I'm not willing to let go yet of my claim that that Graces is a perfect game, but it's definitely putting me through my paces. I'm looking forward to it, Pottery. Oh, Floor 8, I can't wait. Oh, Pottery, have a little bit more faith in me. Come on, just a skosh. Come on, we can, if we really focus and dial in and prioritize the combat over the incredibly rewarding and refreshing literary conversations, we can make it to the rest of the content that will motivate the further literary conversations. Let's think of it that way. Yeah, I was thinking about that. It just feels like such a chore to dial in more to that weakness targeting at the very end of such a long game, but I hear you. I'm sure that'll help. Either that or, I'm not too much of a man to turn down the difficulties to if push comes to shove, but we're not there yet. We'll see. Think good thoughts. Maybe I'll put in some grinding. We'll have a good vibe going on Friday to usher in the weekend and do some more Graces. Same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. You know where it is. You know what we're about. All right, friendos. Always a pleasure. Grail and Pottery, you especially. TZ, thank you for stopping by. If you liked what you saw, if you appreciate what we bring to the reading and appreciation of these games, hope to see you back. Maybe you'll join us for the end of Graces, maybe even for the next playthrough. And so too to all of you watching the VOD out there. Until next time, my dear friends, I hope you think well, I hope you game well, finish out your week strong, enjoy yourselves, be good to yourselves. Back at the same time on Friday. I'm Aaron Suduko, this has been Tales of Praxis. Cheers, friends.